Welcome to another sudden episode, as they always are, of the Four Horsemen. This time, we're talking about the LCS Players Association, a body many of you may not know exists because it spent a long time doing absolutely nothing and getting funded by Riot. But now, I hear that's changing, and they have exciting new things to announce today, including selling the naming, image, and likenesses of the LCS players under a new group collective bargaining agreement. And joining us is the head, kind of, he says, kind of.
Group rights agreement.
Group rights agreement.
We'll get into it.
We'll get into it. That's why we're doing this show, to get into it.
My question, is everyone else just cool with how surreal it is that they've picked as a head person for a fucking League of Legends Player Association someone whose surname is Aram? Is this a fucking joke? Is this like that shit where Richard saw it, where like Nintendo's fucking CEO is called Bowser? Like, what's going on here, boys? What is this?
Well, we told him,
is this a skit or something? That might be.
We told him he had to change his name to NARAM.
Right, there you go.
When he actually became the head of the LCS Players Association, but he has yet to legally change it, unfortunately.
I'm sorry, but I can confirm that we do live in a simulation, so.
To be fair, eventually that probably will be a battle that this player association will have to undertake with Riot, which is that they'll have to demand that it's always possible to 5v5 in mid lane, otherwise Riot's ableist against NA. So, there you go. It's all just breaking the ice, just warm up material. It's all good.
All right. So first off, let's talk about, before we talk about what happened today, I think we have to talk about what happened when you took over the LCS Players Association and the number of new people who have joined the board and the new leadership structure and what your goals were when you came in to do this. Because you came from Evil Geniuses was your last job. So
correct.
What was that transition and why are you here and what are you doing?
Yeah, so spent 6 years at Evil Geniuses, worked in liberal politics before and was in early games media, ESFI World, if you remember that. Long lost NA outlet once upon a time, so that was kind of my first gig. Yeah, so did that.
It's now being joined in the media outlet graveyard by Upcomer. So
what's great is there was actually a volunteer for that exact website who was at an event with me. This is how long ago it was, 10 years ago. He turned to me and he was like just a volunteer in Esports. He just begun, and he told me how I should quit working as the editor-in-chief of SK Gaming. Spoiler, that website still exists. And he goes, because we've got this we've got all these millionaire investors in the SFI, so you want to get in early with us now and join over. I was like, you know what? I'll let you take this one. See how that goes.
I don't know if we ever had. Oh, well, there you go. I don't know if they ever had investors. I didn't make a dime doing that.
That's the problem. I imagine the investor never came along. I imagine it was just a pipe dream or something. There's always someone talking about funding these sites.
Yeah, but Monty, I think your question was how I got here, where I'm what sort of changed in my arrival. At EG for 6 years, left in large part because I wanted to get back to working on ecosystem work. I didn't want to work at individual team level. I think a lot of my late work there was on things like the Louvre agreement and working on LCS stuff and committees and things. So I was looking at developer work or maybe going back to politics, and had a friend in the industry point this job out to me sometime in February, I think long after it had been posted, and say like, hey, take a look at it. Spent some time talking with Darshan, and we got into a kind of a long courting process to figure out like if this made sense and how it worked. I was super skeptical out of the gate, to be honest, because I'd been on the owner's side. I got EG back into the LCS and had heard everything about everyone's opinions of the PA at the time and its ineffectual nature, and that it hadn't done anything of note or of service to anybody really. So I had that very strong sense. I also understood that it was that it was funded by Riot, and like how could this possibly be an independent and like effective arm for players if it's being funded by the publisher, no matter how good intentions might be.
We wondered that for a long time. We wondered that for a long time, how that was actually, when it was announced that it was being created, it was very weird and a conflict of interest that was happening.
For sure. An inherent conflict. And I think, I was not there at that time, but I think I look back at it, it was clearly born out of the fact that they were creating franchising, which was going to put enormous amount of power into a limited number of team owners. Players would now have very little agency about where they could go to pursue professional play, right? Like you can't just join a team that's going to win and and promote up into the LCS in the future anymore. You have to be on one of these teams. They can set terms of engagement at the end of the day, unless you have a lot of power as a talented player. So, those things were all very big questions for me. And, when I learned that, yes, the funding relationship had ended from Riot at the, in, I think, November, October of 2020, I started talking to Darshan in 2021. But they had funded for the next year and so there was money in the bank, and I could basically, if I came on, I could come on, and that money has served as a runway to be able to figure out, well, how do we do work to show that we actually can provide value, that like this thing makes sense, that it works for players, that players can figure out how to use it, how to achieve advocacy for themselves. And then also be able to figure out how do you grow its power and make it sustainable so that it can exist beyond the end of this sort of like finite runway that we found ourselves with, which for me is a really exciting opportunity. As we talked to the pre-show a little bit about CSPPA and the fact that they started with this and with self-funding, that's a big challenge because they had to go out and somewhat cart before the horse, have to create funding before they created value or create funding as value out of the gate, which is a really challenging thing to try and do, especially in this ecosystem. So, we've been working on this behind the scenes for quite a while and taking a long time thinking about how we would approach becoming sustainable. Sustainability is required. Obviously, I can't keep doing the job if I don't have a salary, and we can't do things like collectively bargain unless we have money for lawyers, and we're going to need serious lawyers to do that because it's a serious project doing sports collective bargaining. So that was sort of the roadmap that got me here, and the reason why I chose this. And I had a lot of people tell me when I took the job, like, you're crazy, like this is a dead end, it's good, you're like killing your career, like there's nothing that can be done with this thing. Genuinely, people who are like, I hope that you come out of this alive, was like, was a sentiment. And I
and then you put the phone to Mark Merrill down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's it's been an interesting ride, but like this is really exciting, and obviously like it's been a really scary couple of days, like putting together something like this. I was on the team side when the CSPPA stuff happened and like experienced it from that perspective, and so I knew that there was a lot in front of us to make sure we like communicated well, understood, like educated people on how this works, its integralness to the system, the value it creates for players. And yeah, we're still at the outset of it, but I appreciate you guys giving me time to talk. And, I welcome all your questions, especially Thorin, who sounds like he may have some skepticism about the value of players associations writ large. So
I will say on the topic of the Riot one, where obviously they initially set up this player association, right? I actually, believe it or not, don't think that was an entirely like net negative premise, because the problem goes like this. Yes, obviously I'm very skeptical of what Riot will do, and I didn't imagine they would ever let that particular player association like cause like meaningful change they wouldn't want effectively. Maybe if it was aligned with what they already thought was like reasonable, they would allow it. But the reason why in the short term I actually think it had some value as a premise is because I don't believe the pro players, and I know this from CSGO especially, they would never have done this on their own. Like, first of all, as you can see, trying to get a pro player to even pay the dues to pay for what will then effectively benefit him and even potentially make him more money is like trying to get blood out of a stone, mate. You can't do it. You just somehow you cannot get it through to their brain, because the premise goes, because it doesn't yet already exist and do that, they can't see the value, unfortunately. So in the short term, I actually think there was potentially a good reason as to why Riot did it, because when me and Monty worked with Flashpoint, a lot of people might not know this, we had a dispute publicly with the CSPPA, right? But what people don't know is Flashpoint actually wanted the CSPPA to partner with us, because what we wanted them to do effectively was take over the task of herding cats, which is getting pro players to agree to one thing and then do it. Whereas the premise in the past was players might individually agree to something. You give them the money, the reward, the contract, but then they don't keep their end up. So the actual premise from companies in esports was, we actually want essentially like adults we can interface with, who can then make a deal. Look, obviously there can be some compromise, but then on your end you go to the players and you're all united around someone, and then you agree to do the thing. So I agree with the premise of it. My problem with it in League of Legends was, like I say, I think it had a fairly limited scope just by the nature of who created it, who funded it, and the connections with Riot.
Very fair. I agree.
But
I was also confused, by the way, even in the press release here, which I get it, it's always going to be this way, right? Why in the press release though? Because one thing I was confused by is in your intro, I agreed with a lot of it. I actually thought it was very ineffectual as a union. A lot of the stories, even the things they said they'd done, when I sort of read the news, I was like, what really have they actually accomplished here? Like, haven't they just sort of like officially agreed something with Riot or something? Like, has anything come of this? One thing I was confused by is in the article, the Medium post, it sort of like builds it as like, we've done these things with it and now it's going to move to this great new place. I'm actually confused, mate. Like, can you tell me for real, before your time, what did the LCS PA actually do? Did they actually do? Is there anything sort of tangible you can point back to?
Yeah, I would say if there's one tangible thing that has value above all else that the PA did before my tenure, and this was all credit to Hal, who came from the NBPA as associate counsel and has been somebody I worked with. He's been very kind in giving me time and counsel post his tenure as
This is the
executive
most
director.
recent guy who was the leader, the commissioner, whatever.
Yeah,
correct. And
Right.
yeah, he comes from being a lawyer at the NBPA, and the thing he did that was most powerful above all was he looked at the way that teams talk to players about contracts historically and say, you can't tell anybody what's in this contract. You can't tell another player. You can't tell anything, which is, for decades in esports has been the status quo. Players being told that you're violating your confidentiality if you share this information. And I said, that's not the law. The law actually says, federal and state, that every employee has a federally protected right to share information about their contract with fellow employees, with someone who would act to serve in their best interest for negotiating or helping get them better terms, like a lawyer, like an association or union. So he put together the player contract database, he put together legal memos around that to help dispel any myths that might have occurred had he not done so about whether or not players could do it, and was able to get players bought in and get support to be able to have people actually put their contracts in. We now have a database that's thriving. We keep a majority of player contracts in there at all times across all positions. We do our job every year to collect and bring in that information that helps to pool information for players so they can see what's being signed across the aisle from another player. It's a huge act of collective effort from players, and it is meaningful. Like when that got introduced, you saw a really significant gains in player compensation as well as in player terms. Now, I think that's the one thing that's been really successful that I've had to carry on. I think there is a lot of places where the association wasn't organizing players, educating players at the level that any sort of self-respecting PA or union should be doing to make sure that their rank and file understand what's going on and are helping to bring up issues and act from what players want and need. So that's, before my time, that's the biggest thing. And that in and of itself is the biggest thing any group has done for players in esports, period, in my opinion. That thing has enormous power, and I say it here in the hopes that someone from CS, I've talked with CSPPA folks about doing it, and people in Overwatch and anywhere else do the same thing. People should be sharing their contract information with each other. Look at your rights, do that. I came here in part because I've seen how team contracts change because of the LCS and how that spread across the industry. And I hope that our work here, both in there, doing the group rights that we're doing now, will help to similarly improve conditions as other groups of players in other games see what can be done. So yes, that thing, I'll point to that one big important thing as something that was done.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I also wanted to sort of talk about that a little bit, because one of the things I was super curious about and sort of how this might affect things moving forward. I think we all know that NA League sort of operates under the purview of a cartel of team owners that are essentially, to a certain degree, in cahoots with Riot. Because
Richard doesn't mean literally the 10 teams. He means the big teams that sort of colloquially have a little sort of group, maybe.
Yeah, and everybody knows who they are.
Yes.
Don't even need to speak their names or anything like that and upset them. But what we found in the past, for example, is that when new orgs have tried to come into the space, they have basically colluded with Riot to fuck them over. They have benefited from disproportionate favor from Riot. They've been able to get away with things that they've then simultaneously reported other teams for doing. And when it comes to
these are all Monty's triggers you listed off it, but keep going.
Yeah, when it comes to salaries, my understanding is that the Player Association set up this database. Anybody can sort of dip in, look at who's making what, and that's
players
obviously
who submit contracts can see. You have to participate to play. Is how
right.
How it works.
Okay, so which is absolutely fair. That's how it should be. But my question, I guess, to you would be, if that disproportionately powerful group within the League of Legends ecosystem agrees to, I don't know, for example, salary fixing, where they all have an agreement that they will not go above a certain amount for any player under any circumstances, even though they're ostensibly in competition with each other, how can a player association tackle that?
Yeah, so the best tool that any organizing body can do is be a share of information. Knowing the facts of contracts and seeing information and how trends shift is going to be our number one, but also having relationships within the industry and ecosystem, both among other teams, among Riot. One of the things I did when I came in was really take an organizer's approach. I come from politics, and you have to have the contacts in the right places if you want to make change. If you just stand on a pedestal and yell and no one's there to hear or no one cares to listen, like it's not going to do anything. So I set up regular meetings with people across Riot on a regular basis. I meet bi-weekly with a bunch of different teams, LCS, Academy. We're in regular contact with their PR to make sure that whenever Riot's putting something forward, we're getting eyes on it first as much as we can to either give feedback or say like, hey, this is actually a problem for us. So there's a bunch of steps. I talk with Greeley on a regular basis. We'll be talking with Jackie on a regular basis. So like those elements are a really important step. And we also are talking on a regular basis with people on the team side and our players. Both we have reps at every team now who I communicate with on a regular basis about things and get information from. Like that information web is not something that gets built overnight. It takes time. It takes a lot of trust and buy-in from people to say like it's worth showing up to a meeting with you every 2 weeks because you're bringing something to the table. It's a value, right? Like those things take work, take effort, and are really core to what I worked on in my first few months on the job and have worked to sustain and build on. So I think that when you talk about any concerns like that, where there might be people taking action that is like unethical towards players or taking advantage of players, that's going to be the first and best way to act. It's just really hard to act when you don't have the information to know what's happening. So that, again, we've also worked on taking lots of smaller projects, people might say, issues for players on an individual level to try and make sure that, if I can support one player and an issue that they're having, one, it's my job, but two, I'm hopeful that doing good by a player will help bring goodwill so that when another player asks, like, what do I do? They say, go to the PA. So, that's like, it's sort of I guess someone described it as like the Ted Lasso approach, like season 1 of Ted Lasso, whenever he's like, he's fixing the shower head and things. Like you got to do some of the little work to build faith in a thing. And that's what a lot of this has been. I don't have any information about what you're describing. I'm not sure if it's like if it's an apocryphal story or tale, or if you're reporting it as something you believe today. But if it was, I would investigate it fully.
It definitely went on in the past. I don't think it's a factor now. I don't think it's a factor.
He's not meaning for League it's happening right now. He's meaning like since it has happened in the past in other games. Somebody
I have seen it in other spaces.
Yeah, somebody even argued the entire Overwatch League is effectively this. So the question is, if it was to happen in the future, essentially, what would you do? I have a corollary question, which is along similar lines, though. The biggest area of, I would say, disappointment, underwhelmment of the CSPPA in CSGO has been that they have consistently shown on the things that actually are really important to players, they will never down tools. They have done it one time. They boycotted one match, and it was actually for a very frivolous reason, which was beyond what wasn't even proven, and quite frankly, now sounds like a campfire story. Meanwhile, when there were real issues, mate, like a tournament organizer agreed, we won't play past a certain time of day. They just let that be violated over and over again, even when they had a public agreement with this tournament organizer. And the problem was, not only did the CSPPA seemingly never attempt to even unholster that main gun that you have, which is the players won't play and will sort of force you to the table, but the players, if you talked to them, didn't even have that as a concept, as something they could conceive of. They all sort of felt like, well, unless we're certain we can win the battle, then, aren't we just like screwing our own careers? So to me, that's a real bridge that like any association I have to understand where they're at on that one, because to me, soft power is great. And the idea of having conversations and relationships is all great, but eventually you can sometimes in really serious topics reach an impasse where one side has to force the other one to. And if you're a player, ultimately the only true leverage you have is to not give the person your labor, to not play the game. So in something scenario, it doesn't have to be that exact case. Like, can you give us your perspective on this? What do you think of that?
Also, Thorin, to jump off of what you're saying too, is that the reason why they were not boycotting events that were going on in the middle of the night by this one tournament organizer is that their model was predicated on being paid by tournament organizers. And this was the tournament organizer that was paying the CSPPA, whereas the one they boycotted was not paying the CSPPA. So it became really like a protection racket. And to this point, this is a concern because previously when the LCSPA was being paid by Riot, who is the tournament organizer, then the players wouldn't necessarily want to boycott LCS in order to achieve their goals, right? Because that's where the funding is coming from. And the leadership wouldn't want to do that either.
Yeah. A few things there to unpack. I think there's one side, which is straightforward to your answer. I take nothing off the table. I come from progressive organizing and worked with many unions in labor, and I understand that every employee, not just players are employees, they're workers like you or me. They're most fundamental power is the right to not work and the ability to withhold their services. And if you were in my job and you said anything different, then that has to be on the table at all times. You would be absolutely incompetent, and so I'm not going to be the first one to do it. So of course it is on the table. But I also say, to the second point here, we have to walk before we can run. I can't ask players to put their heads on the line when I haven't shown what we can do for them at a base level. And coming in, we had so much room to do collaborative work that can be positive for everybody on board before we need to get to anything that has to be contentious where we're in those fights. We also have, the third point, a very different setup than CSGO, which makes a big difference. In CSGO, the players are dealing directly with the team owners and the third-party developers who are, working on things like Louvre Agreement, where they're already in cooperation, right? They have they really have a two-party system there, which is more akin to typical labor organizing. We have a very, very unique three-party system in League of Legends, where the developer takes an incredibly hands-on approach and has, at the end of the day, under current setup, they have all the power in terms of deciding what happens and what doesn't. Because of that, both the players and the team owners are lobbyists in a sense to the developer about how to make changes and what policies should or shouldn't be in place. And so, there's a slightly different dynamic than your traditional like two-party system. We're not going directly against one of the group, tug of warring. We're both playing up to Riot in many ways. And I think keeping that perspective in mind, that they're in the same boat as we are, when there's things leaked about pulling back, about pulling team owners voting that they want to pull back the import rules and things like that to bring all import teams. I don't break a sweat, because I know that every single piece of that information, if the team owners vote, it's no different than if the players vote. We can have an advocacy stance. We can take measures to prove our will towards something. But at the end of the day, we're lobbying Riot. We're using the tools we have to make the case to Riot that something's in the best benefit of the league and of, in our case, the players especially. And I think that's been a big focus for us, is, that we have put out fires behind the scenes already where, when we're talking with Riot, I'm very clear about, hey, if this thing, we're talking ahead of time before something goes public. So that's a big change, because historically, a lot of these groups, including ourselves, have been caught after things happen and have to deal with attempting to respond or not responding at all to something that's happened to us. And so we've already changed a lot of things to where we're talking about something before it happens. Riot's asking us, well, what do your players think? Because they know we can actually get real information about where players stand on something. We can give feedback and say, hey, we can't get on board with this thing as it stands. Please don't go forward publicly with it. We would have to oppose this if it did happen. And can we find something that fits for everyone? And, or, can you explain why you're doing this so that we can talk to our players and help educate if that is something that is actually reasonable? So we've had a lot of conversations like that. And I've been very, Greeley and I are very direct with each other. I don't know if you ever met Chris Greeley. He's from New Jersey. Yeah. He's a very straightforward guy. And I like to try and be the same way. And so, we'll have hard conversations. And so far we've always been able to come to an understanding and find a middle ground. But, everybody knows on both sides that that's not always necessarily going to be the case. And, you can be respectful in opposition and also need to take the stand that you have your conviction behind, which, again, to state clearly for you, Thorin, could include a labor stoppage at some point in the future if that's where we felt like we had to go to protect something that was that important to us. So, those decisions come up to the players at the end of the day. I don't stop labor. They make those decisions if they ever want to. And we are not a union yet. So players or employees have a right to strike regardless of unionization. That's a fact, but unionization makes it a simpler thing to pull off. So we are doing a good job collaborating right now. We've worked on a lot of projects with Riot. There's a bunch of stuff that we haven't had to fight publicly. If you notice, there hasn't been as much stuff going on in the public that's been big backlash towards Riot and us in the last 8-9 months than I would say happened in the past. And a part of that is because we've been working to try and get things that actually work for both sides, whether it be COVID protocols or whatever else the case may be. I think obviously the biggest collaborative effort that is in the public face for us now is the effort we put in to make Champions Queue happen. And that, it's different than a traditional labor dispute, but this is a huge quality of life thing for players. Riot put serious money behind it. We went to them, said, we need to create something that works here. It's a huge problem. And we have talked to all of our players, and we believe if you follow these 4 steps to deliver a real product that's accessible, that has real stakes for players and has support from you and has players in power to make decisions about how it works after it started, then you're going to be successful. And they followed through like 4 for 4 in that. It took longer to launch than we wanted to, but we were always talking about why it was not going to start on time, why we were waiting to make sure it was in a place where it could be successful. And now we have something in this space that we know players in other regions are dying for, or like, why don't we have Champions Queue? How can we get this thing? This is amazing. It's FPL, but it's developer funded and backed in a completely like in-house way. And like, it's incredibly exciting. And I think for us, it was a big win for players that were able to say, I didn't think it could ever happen. I never believed something like this would actually happen. So, and up to the days before it launched, they were like, it sounds cool, but I'll wait until it actually happens because I've been burned before. So, that's the work that we've done collaboratively. And yeah, this is something that's putting ourselves out there more. Group rights are something that, as everyone saw in CSPPA, there was a ton of backlash there. And, we can get into more about that or the how and why if you guys want to, but it's, but our approach here is something that we know is, it's going to take time to make sure everyone feels the same level of on board and work. And we hope we put in the legwork ahead of time to make sure that we can be successful there.
No, those are definitely some things we should hit, by the way, later. Well, yeah, go ahead, Richard.
Yeah,
sure. I went for an hour.
No worries. Here's a question. So obviously with this new announcement, it sort of heavily implies that there is going to be, how should we say, like a more effective, more pointed, kind of process for player issues, in particularly around collective bargaining and image rights compared to what there has been. I'm just wondering if that comes with a new set of stipulations, because another thing that really kind of put us off kilter about the Player Association wasn't just its initial funding by Riot, wasn't just that Riot got to pick the guy. I mean, Hal was recommended by Riot Games. Riot Games presented a shortlist to the Players Association. By the way, I don't just put that on Riot's doorstep. I think the players have got to be proactively fucking interested in who represents you. And clearly they weren't, because, they're generally a bunch of fucking overpaid, overprivileged, fucking lazy bums, especially in League of Legends. That's my experience.
They'd vote to fucking end the whole split while still wanting to get paid. So if anyone's wondering if Richard's like being hyperbolic there, they did essentially expect to get paid while not working. So
yes,
absolutely. Just put that out there.
I take exception with these points, but please continue.
No. Exception noted. Exception noted.
Thank you.
That will be reflected in the record. But no, but obviously there've been a number of players that had like ownership stakes and very strong ties, shall we say, to organizations. And I think now, if you want to be serious about getting the best deal for players, I think essentially the players should have to make a choice. You can take the equity, but then you cannot represent players because by de facto you're also representing an organization. Or you can represent the players in the association, but you must eschew any equity you have, and it precludes you from taking any in future. I don't know if you agree with that.
Oh yeah, we absolutely agree.
To clarify, this is from Bjergsen owning part of being a partial owner of TSM while being on the board of the CSPPA.
There were also half a dozen Cloud9 players who took equity as well at one point in time. There was that as well. So.
Fair.
Yeah. We totally agree. I mean, but when we talked with Thorin before he rejoined, one of my first questions to him was about what's the standing on that stuff? Are you do you still have ownership? So we are all clear on that front, and it is important to us. I similarly worked at EG. I had equity in Evil Geniuses when I left. When I left, I spent a lot of time talking with them, saying I cannot take on this job in good conscience if I have equity in a team. So we made sure to clear that out and make sure that I had no similar conflicts of interest. You have to be if you want to work with players, you have to take that approach and be and both as a player and as representation to have your your allegiance is clear.
On this topic,
I applaud you for actually eliminating your conflict of interest, which is what nobody in this fucking industry does. So thank you for doing that.
Yes.
Right. When it says, I mean, it's even literally capitalized, the word group rights. It's not even just in normal English, right? When you say that to a fan, that could mean it's such an open, vague topic, right? Basically, my question, I would frame it again, I'll contrast it to the CSPPA. A major concern that people who were team owners had. Now, it wasn't the game dev you're battling or the tournament organizer. It's actually the team that the player in the association plays for. A major concern in 2020 with the CSPPA was that they didn't just imply it. They came out and openly claimed that they had rights for the players that the teams didn't have and that the teams needed to negotiate with the CSPPA in some way to like obtain these rights. Now I can tell you, every team org that I was speaking to within Flashpoint, they were like, the one thing I can tell you right now is we absolutely have all of these people's likeness rights, etc. And effectively, if you know the way team orgs currently work and the model, effectively that's your whole model as a team org, is to get the player rights from the player and then use those to sell to a sponsor, all that stuff. So at the moment, my only issue is
decreasingly so, I would say. But
yeah, of course.
continue.
But the problem goes like this. At the moment, nearly all the big teams we're talking about would lose their money paying these players to play the game. So my problem is this. In an ideal future where we're in a land of milk and honey and the streets are paved with gold and there's all this money and we're just figuring out what's fair, who should have what share. That's great if the players get their likeness rights, of course. That would be ideal, like the NBA. One guy can be sponsored by Adidas, the other guy's sponsored by Nike, the team's sponsored by whoever, right? The problem obviously comes in the short term. I can tell you a lot of these team orgs, if they were in my seat now, would just tell you, aren't you just going to basically bleed me more dry? Like the rights you're trying to battle for, like I won't have anything left at that point in time. Yes, obviously that would be hyperbolic. That's why I'm saying they would say that, not me. But I want to get your take on this because it's not as simple as, a player should have his rights, therefore let's do it tomorrow and, the team org's evil if he wants to keep it. At the moment, it's kind of the main value he has.
Yeah, I'm curious. What would you say? Because you're straw manning for teams here in a sense by saying it's not what I would say, but this is what teams would say. What is your view of that?
I'm telling you exactly what those teams have told me and would say to you if they were sat in my seat right now.
Sure. I'm curious where you stand in that interpretation from teams, though.
Right. My problem is on a macro sense, like I say, as an ideal, as a principle, yeah, I think it's fine that a player wants to secure his own rights. But I would say, I think it's almost like immoral in the current landscape, essentially, to ask someone to pay you to do a job that you act as though makes them money, loses them money, and then you also say, oh, no, I want more, I want more. I want to own more within this. I actually think that's immoral. I don't personally take jobs where I wouldn't join Opcomer, for example, and have them pay me an enormous salary knowing they will go broke in 2 years. I wouldn't do that personally, mate. That's why I'm an unusual person. So that's why I didn't put my perspective forward. I want to get your take on this. Yeah, I'm not a player or a team org, so don't worry about me.
Sure. I was curious because again, I'm on my side of this. Like the perspective you put out from team owners is patently inaccurate for how like these rights work and how we're collecting group rights. This is the same exact set of rights that were the foundation for the first PA and first proper union in American sports. So the 1960s, baseball, they did a tops trading card deal using a group rights program that created the possibility for an actual union to form. They got rid of things like the reserve clause, where a team could hold a player in baseball for their entire career. They had a unilateral right in a player contract to keep them under that team for their entire career, which meant player salaries were dirt, player rights were dirt because you had no bargaining power. So group rights were the basis for that. And that baseball group rights deal that worked with trading cards was the foundation for which every traditional sport PA has used to fund itself and create its ability to collectively bargain properly. So we are doing the exact same thing in the exact same categories. This is a group rights deal. It does not affect a player's individual ability to go and monetize, and it does not affect the team's ability to go out and do the vast majority of deals that they do. It also, our GLA has protections for all these teams' existing agreements. We're not coming in and claiming any rights that a team's already using or has. That is not happening. So anybody who says otherwise is either lying or misinformed, number one. And when we're talking group rights, we're talking, in the big categories of traditional sports hitting group rights are things like, and this is what OneTeam will be doing for us and for players in the LCS and hopefully elsewhere. Frankly, they've done amazing work. If you Google, it's like the Google me like vibe, like Google them. Like
just in case people get confused, OneTeam is all one word. It's the name of the investment group that's with it. Just so people don't get confused by the
sales. We'll discuss OneTeam in a minute.
Sure, but yeah. The work that they will do is hitting the key categories of group rights. These are places, group rights are places where effectively all players are of value to make something happen. Trading cards are the simplest example. A trading card of just 5 players, like a set of trading cards that's just 5 players, has no value. Like the whole point of trading cards is you're trying to collect them all like Pokemon or anything else. If you had the 100 original Pokemon and the only ones that were available were like, I don't know, like Starmie and shit, like it wouldn't do any, like no one would want to buy Pokemon cards. There'd be no value. You need the set, you need to have the highs and the lows. That's how it works. Those are the categories that group rights entail. In sports, you see trading cards, fantasy sports, like licensing to like licensed fantasy, like a fantasy sports provider, like collectibles, things like, here's my blank. it's slipping, but they're the spaces again
games,
where
maybe like
video
that.
games. That's what I was. Yeah, video games is a classic. You play Madden, and on the Madden cover it says NFL PA approved. That is the group license agreement between Madden or between EA and the players. And the way these deals go, when people especially say that teams are going to get bled dry, all parties, including the league, are making incredible money on these deals because the players who have their rights protected through the PA, and both through the group license, but also because that group license funds the PA to collectively bargain and protect their rights. Those rights are negotiated between the PA and EA, and in parallel, EA is negotiating with the league and the teams as a construction of that league to also get the league marks and the team marks. So both sides are doing a deal and making money off of this thing. So the idea that what we're doing is pulling away, their money and we're stripping them dry, we're not doing that. And if you also looked at the categories we just talked about, I don't remember a great trading card program out there in esports anywhere or in the LCS. So the money that I'm taking off the table for somebody is just not the case. We're trying to put something into the ecosystem of value. Trading cards, in my opinion, or digital collectibles, or any of these like possible properties, Funko toys or whatever else the case may be, that could provide a lot of interest to our fans and really build fandom. Trading cards are a big part of sports fandom, right?
Yeah. But my question would be though, is because Funko Pops was in my mind, because I agree, trading cards, yeah, you absolutely want as many people as possible to give it value. Like you say, 5-10 cards in a set is fucking worthless, right? I mean, because like everybody gets to complete the set. There's no trading aspect to it. No one has better or worse cards. Top trumps, that sort of shit. The more the merrier. I get that. But let's say, for example, is there not a realm of possibility where an organization negotiates a deal for everybody on their rosters, not just league, but across the board? They're all going to get a Funko Pop made, and then meanwhile, the Players Association has sort of maybe reached out to Funko and said, listen, we can do a deal and all the players on our books, and then you'll all have the little bobbleheads for everybody in the League of Legends group. And then as a result, Funko break off talks with that organization and come to the deal that has more value and more product, which would be the Players Association. Now, I know that's like an insane sort of like rhetorical question and probably a crazy example, but is that not possible? Yeah,
is that not possible? Yeah, I mean, I think you described the solution in your question though, which is that the sum is greater than the parts in value,
but not to the individual org though, surely.
Oh, I mean, this I will not mince words. This is a change in dynamics. Everyone will have to learn the differences in dynamics when a group rights agreement's in place. Teams in traditional sports, when their group rights agreements were in place, learned and had to adjust to the equilibrium over time as well. That'll be the case here. I don't question that at all. Like yes, something is changing. Like that's like headline, like thing happens and everyone has to adapt. Like that's a reality to this and the program that we're building. But at the same time, I do believe fully that like the value that Funko Pops can create from doing all of the players and all the teams and having all of the rights secured, and also run through the process that Funko Pops is used to when they're working with OneTeam already on deals, most likely in the NFL or the MLB or anywhere else. They're used to working with a players association has the rights and a league who has the rights. Those deals are going to be able to do better scale for everybody involved, in my opinion. And I don't have data sheets in front of you. I can't prove it, but I took economics in college. I was a business major. I think fundamentally, like these things ring true. And again, the categories that we're working within and prioritizing, especially, are places that have not historically been utilized effectively or at all. And we know OneTeam is the best partner in the world at monetizing this for everybody involved. So, I was at the Riot owners meeting yesterday, met with owners directly face to face to talk to them about this, and that we were going to announce this, and this was something we were going to work towards and have an honest conversation, because I have a lot of respect for those people. I've been in the room with them. I've been on their side of the table for many years, and I understand that like there's a process to figuring out how we make this relationship work, and that I genuinely believe like I would, you could put me on a lie detector, even though I'm not really sure those things work based on watching TV and movies, and say that like we're going to do good for them and we're going to create value. Again, if you look at the work OneTeam has just done with Fanatics in the last year to explode the trading card market and create new value for the leagues and players, like this is a true like opportunity for esports to find more sustainability, not just through collective bargaining, but through actual revenue that we can help bring to the table and be a real partner and not just be a drag on the system for some reason.
I have a question for you, Phil, because I'm not sure how this works. Don't the teams get some money off of these agreements for video games or trading cards because they use team IPs?
Yep. That's the dual license part of this. So like I described, there's a parallel negotiation going on at the same time for any of these deals where the league and the PA are both working in concert to some extent to figure out, okay, we want to do our deal with this. In traditional sports, typically the PA signs first and signals the party that's going to go, but those deals are baked in with revenue, with space for the league to also get a share of revenue. There's understanding of kind of who gets what in splits. It's not something I'm an expert on. I'm going to be perfectly honest about that. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of very smart people who have a lot more experience in this than me to understand the dynamics. But that's a collaborative relationship that works because both sides are trying to get to the party and succeed. So that is how that works. The league absolutely gets a lot of money out of Madden, gets a lot of money out of trading cards. These are mutually beneficial relationships. Both sides are getting deals. It's not like we're taking all the deal and no one else is getting something. We're making sure that the players are getting their share. I mean, I saw it in contracts this offseason, players' contracts suddenly having a clause in there that said, we have 100%, we own all of your individual and group rights to NFTs in perpetuity, and we have 100% of the revenue goes to us. Everybody knows, NFTs or anything else, cash grabs, whatever you may have or feelings about them, there's a lot of money to be made there. And the fact that a contract can, in good conscience, state that we're going to take 100% of the revenue from this is unconscionable to me. I couldn't believe it when I saw them. And, that's where we have to do our job to make sure that players are protected and having the same rights afforded to them that you see in traditional sports. And a part of that is protecting their group license and protecting the group rights for them. And a part of that is using the funds from that go to fund the PA to make sure that we're doing good advocacy work.
But
and, moving towards unionizing.
To what Thorin was alluding to earlier about the teams probably being nervous about this and putting these clauses in so that people actually understand the team economics right now, because it's really, I think, important to get that in order to understand why the teams might be reluctant to have these kind of agreements in place, even though, as I'm sure we'll discuss later, and as you alluded to with the Major League Baseball trading card deal, it did in fact lead to an actual union later on down the road. And in this case, that might actually be beneficial to the owners because it could create a salary cap, which is something that owners probably want. We'll talk about that later. But for the moment, the owners are probably relatively, I would guess, kind of wary or adversarial to this occurring, because the problem with esports, guys, and in terms of monetization, is because the way that traditional sports teams monetize. So in traditional sports, the teams actually own the leagues. So they are able to have perfect transparency into all of the income streams coming in. They're also able to do things like sell media rights, which is not possible because Twitch has a monopoly and literally refuses to pay for esports media rights because they got burned on things like the Overwatch League deal, like big time burned, like $100 million burned. So they're not going to do that anymore. And until there's a reasonable competitor to Twitch out there, those media rights are not going to exist. And that's the primary income stream of traditional sports. Now, the other thing that's happening...
So they actually did get burned. They sort of handed Bobby Kotick a gold-plated flamethrower and then said, just do whatever you're going to do with it. And then went, oh, please burn the place down. Oh, please never do that again to anyone not my friends.
This is true. Yes, it's true. But the other thing is that now we have alternate, income streams within esports. So, for example, esports is a marketing engine for the game of League of Legends. Like, that's what LCS is. Now, if I'm the NFL, if more people play football, well, certainly more people might watch football if they're invested in the sport. I might get a better pipeline of future players, but I'm not making money necessarily from every football that's sold. Now, some of them have like the NFL logo on it, so they're probably making some money, but it's not the same as Bjergsen uses a skin in the LCS. People go buy said skin, and the problem is that there is no transparency with the team owners about how much money, like how many people are buying a Zillion skin after Bjergsen plays that Zillion skin. Do the owners get any of that revenue? No, they don't. They don't even know what that revenue is. They don't know how effective the marketing is. Riot has data that says this user who watches the stream on lolesports.com, who is logged in, spends X number of dollars per year compared to the average user. Like, they have ways of quantifying the money that is being generated through marketing that is not shared, and the information nor the money is shared with these partner teams. So the teams themselves are the ones left holding the bag, and the teams are in a very bad place in comparison to developers, tournament operators, and players. They are in the worst spot currently because their income streams are so severely restricted. And so why they may be not super thrilled with this is because it feels like...
Because they're being squeezed from both sides is their value.
Yes.
That's what they feel like.
Yes, exactly. And, we can argue whether or not that's true, but I think it's a fair assessment of a team's perspective in the current landscape. And I think in the long run, if this goes into full unionization, if this goes into salary cap, it could be a good thing for the teams and frankly for the players as well, which we'll discuss later. But like, does that make sense in terms of, you've been on the team side. Is that a fair assessment of what's going on within this space?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we had conversations internally about talking to teams and understanding how this would work and how it would work with teams, like, Marty and I were both team owners, Marty being my contemporary at OneTeam, who was sort of our primary on the deal from their side. He was the co-founder of Splice and Mad Lions and worked there for a long time. And like, we're both keenly aware of the economics for team owners, and we understand that, like, when you walk into a room and you tell them we're going to do a group rights program, the first initial, response is going to be a threat response for sure. Absolutely. It's going to be, whoa, is this going to affect my bottom line? I, again, have laid out the case for why we don't think that's the case and why we believe we're actually going to generate value that's additive to the pool here. And we also do believe, through we cannot survive. Like, if you take one thing away from this session or someone who's watching or listening, the PA cannot exist without group rights. It's the only viable path that's been shown in the history of North American sports to fund a successful players association. It's just a fact. Show me players associations that are successful and operating and unionizing that aren't using a group rights model, and I'll give you $100 bill. I got someone in it. I'll find somewhere. There's got to be cash somewhere in the world. But
and the reason, by the way, why this is important, Phil, sorry to interrupt, but to talk about why the monetization of the group rights is important is because the vast majority of sponsorships go to just a few star athletes, which makes it very difficult for these organizations to be paid for, or indeed for these organizations to have the money to fight legal battles for the rights of kind of the average player, which, as we just saw in America, the Major League Baseball negotiations, which helped to increase the floor of how much, like, the lowest paid players are paid. And that's also what the players associations do. And part of their funding goes to helping these players and paying these players who may not have massive, Nike deals, right?
Yeah. For sure. I mean, it's a humbling thing to see in traditional sports that players like LeBron James and Tom Brady, they don't just join their group license agreement. They're also the first person signed on, with their name on the masthead that says, like, we stand with the rest, because they're in the trenches with the rest of the players, and they might be a superstar, but they know that their left tackle or that backup, like the long snapper is someone who's equally important to the success of the team at some level. And like, you need all those people to make a team, and they join because they understand that, they may have a lot of individual bargaining power, but you can't do it without everybody, and you need to raise, you need to do your part to raise the sales. So that's a big part of our job, is to make sure that all of our players are bought in as well. And it's a huge part. I think historically in traditional sports, you can count on one hand the number of players who have ever opted out of a GLA or threatened to. I think Michael Jordan talked about it in the 90s for a couple of years, but didn't do it. And the only other one I really think of that actually happened was Barry Bonds in the early 2000s. If you played an MLB game for a couple of years there, it was just like Giants. I forget Barry Bonds' number, but forgive me. But it was just his number. It didn't have Barry Bonds in there because he wasn't a part of the group license.
I think it did happen once with the NBA though. I'm pretty sure there was like a game or something. It didn't have one of the stars. I can't remember. Might even NBA Jam or something. I can't remember. There was one. I think there was.
It's incredibly narrow list historically, and it's something where everybody understands the importance of participating, because that collective power, as within any space, when you collectivize, when you put your rights together, both in collective bargaining or in group rights or anything else, you're creating more value, more ability to bargain, and that raises the sales for people. I mean, again, when baseball unionized, not only did they get rid of the reserve clause, but yeah, players who are on the bottom went from making it was they had esports style contracts from the old days. You got a house to live in with 10 other guys, and you got like enough money for food on the weekends. That was like, and you had to work in the summers. Like that was how it was if you were playing baseball and you were like a bottom player for 50, 60 years prior to that. So these things, do raise the bar for the player at the bottom. That's always how unionization and collective bargaining or any sort of collective work happens. Like the people who have or most vulnerable get the most protection and the most support out of this. And it's a huge and humbling again experience to have people who have a lot of individual power say, yeah, I'm going to put my name on this. I'm going to support this and be a part of this thing. So yeah, it's big.
I would even say, by the way, I actually think in esports, it won't be an easier sell to the player because players can somehow never conceive that they'll be worse than they are today. But when you consider what a short lifespan you have in terms of your career in esports, I think it's even more worth it for the superstar player, because in League of Legends, in a year, you could be half as good. In 2 years, you could barely be in the league. So you might actually be that bottom feeder player who's the one who needs the help from the superstar in 3 years. We don't have like the 20, 30 year careers you have in the big sports where you can sort of know, as long as I don't get injured, maybe I'll be this good, So I think actually in esports, you should even be more incentivized as a player to want to participate in group negotiation.
I mean, even in traditional sports, like I read in the new baseball deal that the average, play time in the major leagues for a player is only 4 years. So there, it's shorter than you would think, even in baseball. You have to have pretty good longevity even to play baseball for 20 years, it seems like.
That probably is a stat that's skewed, though. That sounds like that fucking stat where they say, everyone used to die before age 30, but they didn't. What happened was a bazillion people died at age like 8 months or whatever, and then things. I'm imagining that's the guy who gets cut after the 10-day contract.
I think I read something as well, like about NFL playing careers being like unbelievably short. Like the average was something like 4.6, years in total or something. Like it is crazy how short these things can be. With that being said, I did want to ask Phil just a sort of quick question again, and that is, down the road, do you envision any issues with these image rights deals that are, because we've had about 20 years of esports now, and I would say like the last 10, basically it's a shit show in terms of like the contracts that have been signed by players. The contracts that always come across my desk are you essentially sign away your image rights for any purpose in perpetuity. And in certain ones in North America now, this phrase comes in, which always cracks me up. They use anywhere in the known universe, I believe is the phraseology, which, just in case we like...
Colonization is closer than we see.
Yeah, just in case we encounter fucking interdimensional beings that have an interest in esports or whatever. But yeah, so my question is, do you envision any issues? Because obviously... I feel that in any collective bargaining agreement, the value is obviously in the exclusivity, that we can exclusively give you access to these image rights to use in your product. And then maybe a player retires, and 2 years down the road, an org who still has the image rights in perpetuity to a famous player, maybe they go and do something with it. And would that in any way devalue the project you're working on or cause any problems, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, every group rights deal kind of comes out of a place where they're butting up against an existing contractual situation where the rights are broadly held by another entity almost always. And the way that a group rights deal works and the way that ours will work is it has a clause in there. It strikes all existing contracts. And also, if when you sign on to the deal, a big part of you're signing on to is you're basically saying in that deal, you're saying, in the future, like when I'm able to, I'm going to be giving these specific rights to the group. I will not sign future deals that provide these rights elsewhere. So, especially look at the LCS, where contracts, we have 4-year contracts are available in very limited situations right now. But by and large, everyone's on a 3-year contract or less. And the way that a group rights deal will work in traditional sports, or as here, is that as time goes on, as players, if we get all of our players to sign on to the GLA, then as time goes on, there will be a ticking clock that will say that, at the very least in 3 years, players will now have committed their rights to the GLA and they won't be available for them to sign into contracts. That's how this works in traditional sports. It's, and the ticking clock is very much a real thing that you've seen. Baseball, again, there's some really great books on one called Power Shift that was written. That's, I think, a really great breakdown on how baseball rights have developed and really explain, if we're going to be doing this in the future, that everyone will be able to know and signal for people that that's where the rights will be available at a future date if players commit to it. Everyone has, every player has a right to do that. They're not signing away any current rights or anything that they're giving to a team today, but they would be committing to being a part of this program in the future if they're not available today. That's how the kind of mechanics of something like this works. And yeah, like it is something that is putting a flag in the ground as people, as a group, and saying, like, we're going to assert this collective right together. That can be very scary. It was very scary for me. Like, again, it's hard to walk up a bunch of owners and talk to them and say, hey, we're going to do this thing that establishes these rights for players, and I would like to work with you immediately because we can bring real value to you right away. But also, like, the way this is going to work is, if we do our job successfully and our players believe in what we're doing and participate, like, we will have these rights in time, as has happened in every traditional sport, in order to make them capable of existing from a players association standpoint. So, it's a hard conversation, but honesty is the best policy, they say most of the time. So, do your best.
Funny you come from Evil Geniuses, because actually someone who was a key figure in Evil Geniuses over, I'd say about 15 years ago now, actually once told me that a player he had just signed, in doing so, he owned this player's likeness rights in perpetuity and retroactively, and that I had to send him all the POV demos I had from this player in his former team. And that, yeah, exactly. Don't worry though, even back then, I understood to just tell this guy to go fuck himself, whether that was the law or not. Even though I didn't actually technically know whether legally that was possible. But no, what I want to go now. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was saying, you can write anything on paper you want, but there's if it's unconscionable, a judge can still throw it out. So there's
no, he was definitely, like I said, it was a long time ago. He was relying on the idea I'd just go like, shit, better do what he says, and it was never ever going to be contested in court. Of course, we should talk now largely, I think, about the whole funding issue, because as we pointed out with the Riot thing at the beginning, this is a key concern. And again, contrasting it with the experience in CS:GO, as Monty points out, essentially, if you just look not at what they said, but the actions that the CSPPA took, essentially, you could say it's uncharitable, but I would say it's accurate. Essentially, it appears their business model goes like this. The only person who pays them is the tournament organizer. Obviously, that's different from Riot, because there only is Riot in League of Legends. But, the ESLs, Faceit, if they were still around, all these different tiers, Blasts, all the ones that are out there. Essentially, their model, as far as we can tell, was they go to those TOs and they tell them, we want to make an agreement with you. Now, this agreement can contain very simple things that we don't play past 12 o'clock, or it could contain any amount of things that players and TOs might want to agree upon as terms. And basically, despite the fact, to an outsider, they'd think, right, well, since they've made that agreement with that TO and that TO's paid them, they'll now hold that TO to doing those things. And the joke is, if you looked at how they acted, it was the exact opposite. Actually, what happened was, because you've paid, you're now actually the only TO that doesn't have to do that stuff. But any of the TOs that didn't make a deal with us on that issue, we might publicly call you out. So unfortunately, it did start to smack of like it felt like a protection racket. It felt like essentially they only act when you pay them. That's essentially their only model to get paid. And the problem became, like, the players weren't funding it. Essentially, the only people funding it were the very people that this player association was supposed to sort of either interface with or sometimes stand against and sort of hold accountable. So that became a major concern to people as to, like, how with this funding model can it ever succeed? So in this particular case, do the players fund this association at all? Is it just this one team? How does the funding setup work for this?
Yeah, so it's going to work exactly like it works in traditional sports. No traditional sports player pays dues. Dues are a function of your kind of traditional union setup. Players in sports have a different set of circumstances, and group rights have been the method and the proven successful method. So, if anybody says, like, players should be paying dues, like, honestly, I'll be honest. When I took this job, because I'd been on the CSPPA side, I wasn't very well educated in some of these things when I came on. I was like, yeah, we got to figure out how to create value so we can show players why they should pay dues. And then I read a few books and spent some time on the job and talked to some really intelligent people who work in traditional sports, and was like, oh, actually, that's not what people do. The NFL players aren't paying dues. They're doing a group rights program. The PA is not just, they're not just paying in, which they are paying in. If you're participating in group rights, you're agreeing to give some portion of that money that you decide is, the PA votes on how the budget goes, right? So they're deciding what part of their, of that money goes to fund their association, but the PA is also generating value. They're out there in the market with a business partner like OneTeam, who's going and creating on the rights. So that is the function. A player who gives us, who commits their group rights to us, is giving something of themselves to the PA to ensure its continued success. And let us not put any, let's not mince words about this. Like, we are all aware that there's a possibility for an owner who feels like threatened by this and who doesn't like see or understand this as I and our groups believe and our players believe like is the case, that this will be a benefit for everyone, where there could be a group out there putting pressure on players not to sign or actively like warring against it. That's a distinct possibility. Obviously, we had conversations about that. It occurred in the CS space, so that's a real reality. And so don't take lightly any player who puts their name, their pen to paper on a GLA. It's a serious decision. You're putting your foot forward in something that hasn't really existed, especially in your space ever, and you're going to be the first people to do it. Like that's a scary thing to do. That's something that takes courage and takes actual like thought. And we're doing a really hard job to educate our players over the next couple of weeks about what this is, how it works, why it works, and we're doing it publicly ahead of time before we ask anyone to sign, because we don't want there to be any question that we were trying to like pull one over on anybody about anything. We know that this is the right thing to do for our players. It's the right thing to do for the league and for the health of the LCS in the long term. And so that's why we're here. That's why I'm on this podcast talk with you. That's why we're excited to announce, because we're really proud of this. And we're going to do the work to make sure players are on board. But at the end of the day, yes, they're putting their pen to paper, committing those future rights to make this thing possible and to buy into their own future.
Let's talk about OneTeam, which is the organization that you partnered with, which is I don't know if agency is the right word, agency that is owned by the NFL Players Association and the Major League Baseball Players Association. So obviously they have significant experience selling these kind of rights on behalf of these organizations, right? So what is the advantage of going with these people when it comes to creating these group rights, and what is their function going to be moving forward?
Yeah, I would also add, they also represent the WNBA players. They also represent the MLS players. They also represent the women's national soccer team players. They also represent the women's professional soccer league players. And I believe they've been doing some work in conjunction with the NBA. They're not officially represented there. I'm not totally sure about that one. Maybe let's strike that one from the record. I can't confirm, but many of the major sports leagues work with OneTeam in the United States, and the sports players associations work with OneTeam in the United States. They've only been around for 2 years, but like you said, they were a joint venture putting together the commercial arms of the NFL and the MLB players associations. All traditional player associations have a commercial arm that does these sales for them. One of the really important things for me is that I don't want to be doing sales work. I want to be doing advocacy work and meeting with players and helping them and supporting them. This is what OneTeam does. They go out. My job is to make sure that we have a program in place that supports the players, and then I can step away and let OneTeam do what they do for players around the country and around the world. So that's their what they do in their breadth. And for us, I talked to other people who do agency work and do sales work in the space, who may have potentially been a candidate for doing like group rights for us, like someone who like more endemic. And we talked to them. We talked about OneTeam, and they're like, you'd be crazy not to work with OneTeam. Like, these people are obviously like, they are the sports group rights specialists. They do this for everybody, and they do it well. Like, if they want to work with you, you should want to work with them back. And it was a slam dunk for us because they had people in Lauren and Marty who we know, like, who are esports and industry veterans who have real experience and who are really committed and like understand our language and can be in there to support in making sure this isn't a non-endemic endemic marriage that doesn't work that we've seen before. And also, they put so much resources from their top people into this project. Like, it is incredibly humbling to have a guy like Eric, who is the president of the NFL PA for years and who was an NFL player for over a decade and is enormous. He is 6'7", I'm 6'4". He dwarfs me, and he knows it, and it's really strange and something I don't experience very often. And like, to put those people, to put Tim, who's one of their leaders, who was at the MLB PA, people who have put together group licenses, who have been on the battle lines of collective bargaining agreements in traditional sports for years, like in meetings with me every day and every week about how we would do this and how we would serve players and how we would make sure that we were protecting players and making sure that we weren't going cart before the horse or anything like that. It's incredibly humbling. And like, I can say, without a doubt that they are just like they're an impressive group, and they've done a lot of work for groups that are not just the biggest groups. They've done a lot of great work for the WNBA. They've done a lot of great work for the women's national team. Groups with smaller numbers of players in leagues with less viewership and less market share, or less market capacity than say the NFL or the MLB, which are these enormous too big to fail sports almost. So we've seen them do work in spaces that are more niche, that like us, obviously we all believe in esports and its potential and its and where it can be, but we also know that we're not the MLB or the NFL today. So knowing that they execute and do real partnerships, and lots of really strong partnerships for all these different partners across a variety of different scales in sports, it gave us a lot of faith. And I think I said in my tweet, it was really humbling, and I genuinely say that, like, the people who have put into this, they care. Like, they care about players, they care about trying to do right by players, and they know that this is how players get empowered. And again, like they decided not to bring him on again, right? I'm hired because there was a decision not to work with Hal anymore, right? And he has been so generous with his time to talk to me, to counsel me, and to support us in helping to get the GLA right, to help figure out just how this stuff works. And like, it's really humbling. Like, those people are people with a lot of power, and they're putting interest in something that, like, he would have had every right to be like, screw you guys, I don't want to spend your time with you guys anymore. And to have him, be like, actually, this, I did care about this, and I wanted to see this happen, and I'm happy to see you doing it. And how can I help? Like, I don't know. It's big, and OneTeam is no different. So,
yeah,
on that topic, let me push back a sec, Monty, because the problem is this. Yeah. Like, these aren't like fucking, like, they're not just like Jesus and his disciples. Like, we must do the right thing, and we'll reach down to the leper and bring him up, because only we must associate with the poor and the needy, and they are the ones who need our, like, if this was a local Pokemon union, mate, they wouldn't give a flying fuck. So they aren't just doing it because they're lovely guys. I assume at one point in time, either A, they want someone like you in another scene going, and we worked with the League of Legends Players Association, and then they're going to be doing that. So first of all, it's a minimum of that. And then secondly, I assume, do they get paid some sort of a fee? Do they get a percentage? Do they get some sort of, I don't know, how does it work?
Yeah, an agency selling. So there's a, I mean, obviously our contractual relationship is as well, right? Something I can share on a call, but it's a similar business, business arrangement to anything else. They're a commercial group. They do sales. They get a portion. That's how it works. Yep. Simple enough.
Yes.
But there would be I think it's important to note that there would be an agency involved in any case. Typical agency fees are like 10-15%, just so people know. And the advantage, I think, probably to working with OneTeam is it's easier for them to work with companies like Fanatics, as was alluded to earlier by Phil, who are already used to dealing with OneTeam to sell group collective rights in order to make commercial deals for things like trading cards in the future.
Yes, people don't know, Fanatics is actually the word Fanatics. It's the people who make the cards. Because again, people are going to keep thinking you mean Fnatic, the team, unfortunately. Just in case people get lost, same as OneTeam isn't talking about
Fanatics.
OneTeam. So
is that the fans of Fanatics? Fnatic? The Fanatics?
It just seems like a nightmare to say the sentence. Like, and OneTeam have been working with Fanatics to do it. It's like, the esports fan is already gone. Like, he doesn't even know where we are. He's just sort of here.
There's definitely some who's on first with OneTeam on occasion. So
I mean, terrible naming in the traditional sports space to name your merchandise company Fanatics and then your agency OneTeam. That's just fucking awful branding. Well, anyway,
they're doing great, which maybe proves that branding's not everything somehow.
Yeah. But, just another sort of, I guess, an observation, maybe a question. It does seem, based on everything that you're saying and based on the press release that came out today, OneTeam does seem to be principally concerned with the more kind of commercial aspects of things. There's not a lot of talk about, what role they would play in challenging, bad conditions for players, or maybe going head to head against Riot on particular issues that players didn't agree with. And I suppose the observation part of it is, it does seem to me that given there will be, as we know, an agency kind of fee going into OneTeam, is there even a guarantee at all that they would fight those kind of battles if it meant that essentially it could bring down the whole commercial aspect of things and sour relationships necessary to the commercialization of what the players, image rights give you?
Yeah. This was definitely a question. If you're still wondering, there's some comment question concerns there. definitely a question and a good one. It's not one team's job to fight like our battles. We're not appointing one team as the head of the PA. That's still my job. My job is advocacy. Their job is sales. Like, yeah, they do sales at the end of the day. They commercialize things. And, it is important to note that a big part of player power is those collective rights. That's a huge component in traditional sports of how players organize their power and exert it because they have money. When you're a PA, if you go on strike in traditional sports, they build up a war chest from those group rights that allows them to keep players, especially the lowest paid players, from having to take on a second job or, cross the picket line because they're afraid they don't have any money. Like those are, real things. So what their work does is important. It gives us backbone. It gives us power. It gives us real capacity in this space. That is the truth. It also, gives me access. I am one person. I came from the team side. I have a business degree. I worked in politics. I'm not a lawyer. I have not collectively bargained before. Like, these are not my areas of expertise. And as we move towards those things, all I can do is surround myself with people who are smarter than me and know how to advise and have been there before. And they have some of the smartest, most talented people from some of the best PAs in the world and in North America. Like at their disposal, and those people are, I've been on the phone with those people, and they are not, they're happy to have conversations about like, this thing leads to that thing, leads to this thing, like this might impact you in the future in this way. Like, they're humans and they do care about this stuff. They come from labor.
But just to jump in for a moment, what because the press release essentially says that the money, because again, like you said earlier, and I know this from having worked with unions, that you get into murky territory if you have an association fee, because that's more typically, the subscription model is more typically associated with unions, and these two things are very legally distinct in America. But my again, the reason I'm asking the question is Team One are saying essentially that the money they generate from the commercialization of the players' image rights is what's essentially going to fund the player association as a whole. And so if that's the case, then one team's goals have a disproportionate amount of influence over the overall direction of the Players Association. Would you not agree?
I mean, I'm not sure that I think they're like, their goals are I think pretty straightforward. I don't think I have sort of any sense that there's something amiss there. Like their job is to support us in collecting these rights, which is really core to our business. Like that's obviously a top priority. They can't sell rights if we don't have the rights. Like, okay, we're aligned there. Like we both get that. If we don't get the rights, we don't exist in a year. Like, okay, that's like, okay, we're still aligned. We go past that. It's okay. Well, like now how can we make sure we do right by our players and make sure they're doing, like their job is to do right by the players and going out and selling those rights. Once we have the rights in place through a GLA that's like active and prospering, like, their job is to go out and sell. They're not, their job, in part will probably be to help enforce, make sure that the rights are not being subverted in some way in future. They go fight battles with like unlicensed people pushing product and things like that on behalf of players all the time. That'll certainly be a part of their job, but they're not going to be at the collective bargaining table directly, or I'm not sure what else they would be asking for from us. You're talking about their priorities or influence. I think I'm struggling with sort of. Yeah,
I can present a hypothetical for you. So let's say, for example, one team go out. They're doing a great job. They've got fucking trading cards, NFTs, Funko Pops, the whole shebang. It's all on the table. But then Riot Games, being Riot Games, one of the most repellent companies in gaming history, do something that's repellent because, why wouldn't they, right? They've got a history of it. And let's say the players acknowledge it as being repellent and they say, fuck it, it's so repellent, we're going to go on strike. Well, one team are going to go, whoa, if there's no fucking games, all these deals are going to get cancelled. We can't sell a product for a tournament that isn't being played and doesn't exist. This impasse would really...
Yeah, there'll be no PA after that.
Right, and so there's one hypothetical I could conceive of where maybe one team, because of them having essentially this disproportionate amount of influence in the player association as a whole, might want to nudge players away from acting in their own best interests to secure commercial interests, which, yes, will benefit the players, but also do benefit one team.
Do you follow baseball at all?
I've read I'm obviously a limey, so but I've read extensively the history of baseball because I think all the things we're doing in esports, there's so many like analogies and parallels. It's fascinating. Sure. So I would say I have a ballpark, no pun intended, kind of understanding of it.
there's a lockout in baseball. Ended yesterday. Hooray for baseball fans everywhere.
All
And
3 of them are thrilled.
As a new partner with OneTeam, we can say no bad things about baseball. There's my limitations, but you know, they were still selling baseball cards while that strike was going on. They were still working on partnerships. You know, a labor dispute is, you know, the commercial people, you know, the sales guys at the NFL and at the NFL and the sales guys at OneTeam who are doing their parallel deals. They're all in the same boat. They're still trying to go and make their sales goals and do their thing, while the labor side people, me and the people I would be negotiating with, are working on their side. So, you know, the baseball cards are still on the shelves. Those commercial partnerships are still moving along. And, you know, even as there's a labor dispute, you know, the heart of a dispute is trying to figure out what the right balance is. But at the end of the day, people want to get back to work and keep doing the thing that makes them the living and you know, is what their passion is. So, you know, then that hypothetical has been lived out this week for us, and I would expect no difference for how that relationship would go for us versus for the MLB in a situation like that.
One thing I would like to ask about is one area, obviously, where esports is very different from traditional sports, is that Riot Games isn't just, in this case, the person organizing the tournament like the NFL organizes the NFL. They're obviously the game dev, and if you know about intellectual property rights for digital properties, they essentially are far more like overarching than anything in the real world. Like, everyone knows the example, no one owns the concept of football itself. You can have the NFL brand, of course, which has all the history, and to a fan may be football, but it effectively isn't. Like, we can start another league, we can do all sorts of things, right?
Yep, Since XFL, Riot, USFL.
Yeah, sure. Since Riot does obviously have this extra level of power, right? I haven't got like a set question. I'm essentially going to ask, like, how do you approach that? Because some of what you're essentially going to do, if it was, say, player concerns that were specifically about the game, like people think maybe it was too arbitrary the way I was punished, some sort of competitive ruling, or maybe it was too harsh, the actual punishment given, or maybe players think, I don't know, you should be allowed to trash talk in the game and that shouldn't be a punishment. Whatever these issues they might push back on. In your case, you're effectively, in some of these scenarios, aren't you effectively just hoping the best you can sort of do is maybe coerce them / get them on your side and hope they agree with you? They have sort of power that you don't have in other sports, right?
Yes, 3-party system, absolutely. It's a very strange thing, and especially as someone who, you know, I'm learning on the job in some ways. There's a part of this that is figuring out how do you learn on the job in a job that doesn't have a precedent. You know, like I can read all the baseball books I want, I can read all the football books I want, and at the end of the day, they are not dealing with a developer who, makes the game and owns the thing itself. So, you know, it's one of the things as we talk about. You know, you'll notice we're not saying like we're unionizing tomorrow. Getting enough funding to be able to collectively bargain and have the finances to do something like that is a huge first step to be able to get there. But, you know, we also have to get the buy-in from the players to, you know, vote and support unionization, which is, you know, an education process, and talking with them genuinely about, you know, what are the positives or negatives, you know, are the potential of a salary cap, is it outweighed by having more rights and free agency and more ability to like control your intellectual property? Like, you know, there's a million questions that have to be answered along those ways that we have to get to. This is the first big step, but the other and much more monumental hurdle is, you know, collective bargaining in the United States is a 2-party design system. They didn't build this thing in the laws for 3 groups to work in it. And we cannot collectively bargain as a players association with teams if after we make a decision about, well, okay, players can go, you know, have their own individual, like, you know, liquor deals or something, and then we go, or they can, you know, have a gambling sponsor or something, and then we collectively bargain that, and then we go back and the developer says, actually, you can't do that. And it undercuts our collective bargaining, right? So the only way collective bargaining works in esports is for us to find a pathway for the, you know, they talk about bargaining units. So the teams in the NFL form a bargaining unit that is the league that serves as a single entity to bargaining. So even though there's 30 teams signing contracts, when they negotiate as one unit and agree to the outcomes of collective bargaining as one unit that they will all honor. So, you know, in our view, and we've communicated this with Riot already, is that, you know, we're very interested in this, but we have to figure out a way for the teams in Riot to form a single unit so that we can bargain collectively. And that's, you know, that's a big thing to work through and to take that step. And there is no real legal precedent for this. It's it's a untrod ground in many ways. I think that's why a lot of people are excited from the player side. I think a lot of legal folks are interested in, like, what does this look like? How does it work? It's groundbreaking. It's interesting, and, you know, it would fundamentally change the dynamics for how esports works if we were to do it. And, you know, I can tell you clearly right now, I do not have a good answer to how we get there. I'm not a legal expert. We've been talking with people, but there's a bunch of questions and a lot of uncertainty. And when your lawyers are uncertain about what the law is on stuff like this, then you're really like, in new territory. So that's one we got to work through. That's how we have, as we work towards something like collective bargaining, how the developer fits into it. That's, open questions that have to be solved that we're talking with all stakeholders about. Because again, I think there's a lot of people, including Riot, including team owners, who think that collective bargaining is something that would benefit the league as a whole. And yeah, figuring out how we can do it properly is really number one on the list for projects aside from this.
I think we have to talk about the collective bargaining aspect of this now, if that's the path that this is going towards, because it's for those of you who don't know, right now the Players Association is not a union under American law. And one of the reasons why it's not a union, and I actually talked to Hal Biagas, the former head of the LCSPA, on the Essential Esports show that I did with Cloud9, if you guys want to go back and look at that for a comparison. But basically, what happens in America is that there cannot be a salary cap on the league unless there is a singular union or body to negotiate against, because otherwise it's a monopoly of the owners / Riot dictating what the prices of labor for the players is, basically. And the reason why there hasn't been a push towards unionization is that this is actually, I think, at least it has been true up to this point, that it's not in the best interest of the players, because as you can see in the LCS, having uncapped salaries basically results in star players getting paid way more than they probably would be getting paid, or allows them to collect onto a team like Team Liquid that has a bunch that's spending far more money than other teams, so that they can play together, basically a bunch of what would be broken up among multiple teams if there was a salary cap, or players would just be getting paid less for the opportunity to play on a better team, right? As is the case in many traditional sports. So why suddenly does it sound like you guys are kind of opening the pathway towards unionization, when previously it has been argued that it is not necessarily in the player's best interest in order to approach this?
Yeah, I think that there's certainly some, misunderstanding about collective bargaining, how it works. And also, there's often, I think, in esports, a rush to align like traditional sports in many ways. I mean, many player contracts have currently or have had in the past issues that would not pass antitrust muster, because again, unless you have collective bargaining, traditional sports, the thing that allow restrictions on player movement, on fixed contracts that you have to join a draft, those sorts of things are all components of collective bargaining.
Right. That's why we can't have a draft, by the way, guys.
Exactly.
Well.
Can you actually give an example of something that have been in real esports contracts that technically, they shouldn't have put in there? It was a bit naughty. Can you give it like a hypothetical?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's, like broad question around what sort of restrictions on going to play for other teams that a team can put in. If you're not in collective bargaining, and you haven't collectively bargained, that a player must play under, Ben Simmons is on a 5-year contract. He cannot give 2 weeks notice. A lot of states have right to work laws that say you can give, 2 weeks notice on an employer, right? Like, there's like open questions in many active, commonly held contracts in esports that you wonder, well, would that actually pass antitrust muster? We know there have been questions in Overwatch League about
Tfue and FaZe, if you followed that case. Yeah.
So these restrictions are all things that have yet to be settled in law or in court. There's been very little effort to fight in those precedents, but we get feedback constantly with Riot about rules and things where we say, hey, we're not sure that this would pass the antitrust muster. We don't think that this this is restrictive of an employee's right, outside of collective bargaining. How could a team restrict this based on labor law? So we're constantly asking and pushing those questions. And in traditional sports, again, collective bargaining, what it does in any unionization setting in America is it bypasses antitrust laws. So when antitrust is the law of the land in the US, it keeps groups from being able to collude to fix prices or set salary limits or anything like that, right? You can't do that. It's a fair open marketplace for employees to go and seek their best opportunities. And there are many laws that govern and protect employees and your ability to leave a job if you don't want to work there and go work somewhere else. There's all sorts of stuff in the law about that. When you unionize, you are basically, both parties are saying, we're agreeing proactively that we're going to be bound by whatever rules we agree to play by, regardless of antitrust. So we're agreeing to this new set of parameters. So that is how you get a draft, where the collectively bargained agreement says all new players who want to play in this league that has a union are going to submit for a draft and agree to play wherever they are drafted to. Right? That's a collectively bargained thing. You can't just do that in day-to-day life. You couldn't go, you couldn't finish school at an accounting school and just be drafted by PricewaterhouseCoopers and have to go work there for 3 years. You might feel that way.
Is it essentially because you're agreeing to do it, like explicitly this, or someone on your behalf, this means that like it supersedes what would otherwise be the law?
Exactly. So that is, so you're going around it, and that's where the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board, gets involved to make sure that these parties are willfully agreeing to do this bypass effectively. Is kind of the layman of how something like that works. So there's a lot to be gained there that isn't just a salary cap in terms of a player value that a team might want, including things like putting together a draft or putting together player selections. For us on a player side, it's setting we currently, the only thing that really sets the salary floor in academy is the fact that it's based in California, that we have people in California, and so the California minimum exempt salary is the law of the land on what a player can be paid, right? That's sort of where that number comes from. Every year we talk to Riot and say, okay, well, they bump the minimum wage, and the minimum wage, you factor that in, it says, okay, $62,000 is the new minimum. So that's how those things work today. It's really just working off of existing labor laws that are they're just the law of the land from the state. So if we set if we go into collective bargaining, then we have the power to say, hey, like, we're not going to accept that, that minimum, literally the least you can pay a person legally in California to do this kind of work. So we're going to ask for you to increase that number. That's going to be part of our bargaining, and we're going to raise the floor. So maybe there's an overall cap somewhere, or maybe there's a luxury tax or various methods that are used in traditional sports to try and level the competitive playing field, or like keep teams from spending well beyond their revenues. But there's also benefits. There's gains in the floor, as we saw in this last offseason. You had a lot of talk about things like contract jails. You obviously had the perk situation that Riot's already addressed in how that will be handled in the future. But if we're collectively bargaining, we're never allowing those situations to come out in the first place, right? We're never going to allow a third-party team to control the fate of a player after they've already left, right? Like those are things that we can do to protect players fundamentally. Establishing the lines for how IP is split, and how what a team has a right to do or ask for player. Most player contracts today still say that a player is responsible to do whatever commercial responsibilities the team asks of them that are within reason. This is like anathema to a like typical talent contract. When you sign a contract to go work at Blast or something, every damn thing you're going to do, right? You're not showing up and just saying like, okay, I'm going to do whatever's reasonable, right? You have
like they can tell me, take down the scaffolding and then afterwards pack these things in the butt. Yeah, of course they can't do that. Yeah.
So you have exacting language about what's in there. Every player contract should have that, and it's really not the case today.
Yes.
A lot of them will have a few things laid out, but they still have a broad language that gives a lot of latitude for a team to just say, hey, yeah, I don't care. Like, your off day is not written into this contract. I can have you, come in and do content for us for 8 hours because that's, what we need you to do. So, these are like serious gains for players. We had teams who we talked to in my listening tour last year who said, we haven't had an off day in 7 weeks because we were doing content every day on the off day. Like, these are things that you collectively bargain that improve players, right? Improve players' lives, and the balance of life can be worth those risks or trade-offs. But we don't know that there will be a salary cap. There's a real question. I was on a team that had investment backed. There are many teams in esports who will tell you, out of one side of your mouth that esports is dying and they're burning money left and right, and on the other side are raising $50 million more and pouring it into a team to try and win a championship. If you're investment backed and your goal behind the scenes amongst your investors is to spend money to try and be the best team in the world, even if it means you're losing because you want to be the Yankees in 20 years and be established, then right. This is fundamentally a different economic model.
It's also true that part of what's going on with the esports team, as you allude to, Phil, is that when we look at sports teams in America, which is where these LCS teams are based, these are often toys for billionaires. Their valuation does not reflect the income that they are actually making, because there's a limited quantity of these things and they're fun for the ultra rich to own. Objectively, I would own an NFL team if I had billions of dollars. That would be rad. But the point is that when these people are building the business, they're trying to build a brand that is significant enough and prestigious enough to eventually justify being a very rich person's toy. That is like an exit. That's a legitimate exit strategy in the long run for esports teams. So yes, I agree with you, Phil, that they're playing a long game where they're like, I would like to be bought for $1 billion in 5 years, and I will spend $5 million on this player to hopefully accomplish that goal, right? And that's what their investors are signing up for. So there is an element of that, which makes it so the tiers of the owners are not, quite so sympathetic. But what I will say is, like, on the salary cap subject, I actually think the salary cap would be a very good thing for the LCS overall for the following reasons.
MonteCristo was a former owner of an LCS team. Just want to say that.
Well, I don't have any.
To be said, if you're going to make a statement like I believe, I think that should be said. It's a disclaimer.
I currently do not have any ownership interests in any LCS.
All right, Scrooge, go on then. Tell us why they should never get paid anything.
You need the Adam McKay production pop-ups, little chyrons that just tell the story beside us as we ramble on about all the things that we have conflicts on historically.
So I think you have to look at the current issues with the LCS, because we can't say that this is as healthy of a league or a product as it was in 2016. Viewership is down. It's been viewership has gone up, in LEC and many other leagues, LCK comparatively to the LCS. It's not in rosy health, as it were. And with this viewership decline, we have to look at some of the problems that have been said. Obviously, the production has been an issue historically, although I do think that's improved this year. The quality of teams in international play is obviously, a topic of much conversation. Having North American players, I don't think that's really a factor, but some people say it is. And I think what happens with the salary cap is that, would you get a worse team? Most likely because players would not be willing to take pay cuts in order to play with each other on a team like Team Liquid, right? That's just true. But a problem with LCS is that the team's branding, which is partially their own fault, has been really terrible. And I think the problem is that these star players are so concentrated on certain rosters that there isn't an ability for teams to sign long-term deals, for many of the lower tier teams to sign long-term deals. And for those people who are like, well, those teams wouldn't spend the money anyway. I think they would if they could reasonably pay a star player and actually be able to build around them. The problem is that they don't even have access to get those star players to sign for money right now, or to concoct a business model or marketing strategy for several years around one of those players' contracts, right? And so I think truly that a lot of the LCS games are pretty boring because there aren't storylines and there are not established star players in these teams, that could be solved by distributing star players across these rosters.
Give you an analogy, Monty. Everyone who's watching LEC will know exactly what I'm talking about. The player who was almost certainly going to win the MVP in the LEC, this split, is the player Vethio from Misfits, right? And Misfits is not considered the biggest org in LEC. They're not the most prestigious. They haven't won the championships. In fact, this was a player that they picked up. It wasn't even he was the most sought after player when he came into the LEC. They sort of picked him up as sort of a gamble, and it's paid off. He's not only become good, like I said, he's the best player in the whole league. The problem they have in Misfits, though, is at the end of this year, his contract will run out, and almost certainly, it's not even, this is the key, this is why I'm using this analogy. It's not that Misfits can't pay him what Fnatic or G2 will pay him. The real reason he will go to a Fnatic or G2 is because they've got the other superstars and he will win the league. Whereas if it was in a salary cap scenario like Monty's talking about, like the NBA, for example, if in Fnatic and G2, they've already got a couple of superstars they don't want to get rid of, and they're paying them an equivalent to a max deal, like an Aaron Rodgers type deal, then realistically, actually, Vethio's incentivized to maybe stay in Misfits and they can actually build a whole thing around him. He could be the face of Misfits for the next 5 years. Whereas the reality is probably he's gone at the end of this season. So that would be an example I would give.
And for those of you guys who are saying things like, well, that would just make NA more shit, stop being fucking delusional. NA is never going to do anything at international competition, even with NA super teams, okay? And also, international competition isn't everything. If 2/3 of the games in LCS are games that nobody wants to watch, that's not good for the health of the league. I would rather have the star players broken up, have distinct team identities be built around these star players.
Oh.
So at least the domestic matches are more interesting, guys. Like, that's what matters first and foremost. So not only that, so the salary cap, you can also do things such as reveal player salaries if you have a salary cap, which, by the way, if you want to attract American sports fans, being able to talk about things and speculate about, oh, they only have this much space left, like who's going to take this deal or how can they make it work? Here are the salaries on this team. That's content for you guys that's actually interesting. Number two, it allows you to have a draft, and a draft is also something very interesting to sports fans. Like, imagine, if Jojo Pien, was this breakout star from the draft this year in LCS, it's a very compelling story. And by the way, guys, would also incentivize people to play more seriously in Academy, for fans to watch Academy, because your favorite team's new player that just got drafted is probably going to start their professional career in Academy, which is like, oh, well, I know this player was drafted. Now they've got a 3-year deal with this team. So I'm going to check them out and see if I can get hyped about this. It is so healthy for the overall scene, I think, in order to have a salary cap, by breaking up the star players and by having every team at least have an ability to come back. Because you guys wonder why teams don't spend money in this space. It's because there's no hope for them to be competitive. So you have the only two options for most LCS teams are spend a fuck ton of money to try and be competitive for Worlds, or to spend as little money as possible just to stay in and not lose. But there's no hope. There's no, if I'm at the bottom at the end of the year, I'm going to get first pick in the draft.
It's the reason why Jensen doesn't play for CLG right now, if you don't get that premise, for both parties.
Yeah, exactly. So, all of these things are creating an unhealthy environment in LCS that is boring to watch. And what's the purpose of it? The only thing we get out of this is false hope that an NA team might do well at MSI and Worlds, which accounts for a very small percentage of the total games that they're going to play this year.
I would rather false hope is the Jenkum that every NA fan has been huffing for the last 20 years. Without that, mate, it's 2 bulletins the back of the head out behind the woodshed. So, which do you want, mate? How do you want it? By the way, obviously, do you have any final point? I will just say after this, by the way, Philip, that's an open-ended rant that you can interact with and interface with anybody. There's no question.
I wasn't going to interrupt.
Yeah, don't worry.
No, sorry. I'm sorry to go on this point, but I think it's actually the salary cap thing is actually good. And I know that certain players may not be able to play on these ultra stacked rosters, but I don't think the star player salaries would necessarily go down dramatically. I just think they would be redistributed around the league, and it would create a better, healthier system. It would also create just a better path to pro to have a draft, because at least there's hope for people, right? It's like, it's so random right now, the way that things, new NA talent is brought up within the scene.
Yeah. There's a lot there. Again, at the point, many objections to the false hopes in NA and everything else. Please note, Richard, if you can, again, for the record. But
he believes in NA teams.
By definition, he has to believe there's some hope, unless he's the most cynical bastard ever.
I mean, we can put on my bias hat at EG. When I came to EG, we got to the LCS. I'm very proud of the strategy that they have executed on from a competitive standpoint. Year one, we came in, we said we have to show that we're willing to spend. The Chovy rumors were very real. We were, ready to swing for the fences to prove that we wanted to compete, because you have to tell players that you want to be a winner. And, we also believed that we needed to develop talent, because that was, a proven method to be able, in traditional sports, to be able to build a sustainable model, was to develop and find young talent and sign them to contracts, where you see like the JoJo's of the world. So, I applaud Andy and Greg, who's now over at CLG, for the work that they did in building that roster. And they're not a top, they have not been a top, they've always outperformed their rank and sort of this in the salary side of things. And I think, more teams can or should be doing that, period, in the general sense of things. And I think there's a lot of recriminations that are well earned by LCS operations who didn't think strategically about how to both build faith among players in order to build, in order to get talent to come to you, and also to think about how can you be long-term sustainable and build a a program that can succeed. You don't have to have a salary cap to understand the economics of traditional sports and how teams like build and manage a revolving roster over a course of several years. Like that's, those things are proven and manageable. You have leagues like baseball where there's where there's the lack of a hard salary cap that people work with all the time and build and develop. So I'll leave that there.
Point out that NFL popularity, I think, obviously, who the fuck knows?
Sure.
There's too many factors. But one of the things that I think has caused the NFL
baseball, the ultimate sport where you have no hope if you support every team except
Correct.
like two or something mental like that. Every time someone wins the fucking, I don't know baseball, mate, but every headline I hear is always like, and it's been 74 years since they won last. I'm like, who the fuck would support this team? You know what I mean?
That's the point.
It's a very old sport. That's all.
One of the things that's great about the NFL, and one of the things that I think has caused it to rise to the top popularity of any sport in America, is the fact that legitimately small market teams can fucking win the NFL. The Cleveland or like the Cincinnati Bengals were in the fucking Super Bowl this year. Like that's, you would expect these teams from New York and other big markets to potentially dominate, and they don't. So part of what's exciting about the NFL is it feels like small market teams can be legitimately good with the right luck and the right drafting and the right team building because the salary cap exists.
Yeah. And as with any sport, you're going to have, like, in traditional sports, even with the salary cap, you have teams and ownership groups. The Clippers under Donald Sterling are a great example. Like, they had a salary cap in the NBA. It didn't matter because you had an owner in there who didn't know how to run the team and didn't want to do anything except for leech off of the system. So, you need good owners. And I think from the PA side, we absolutely want, smart, hardworking owners to be competitive and create parity. So a salary cap or not, if you're not running your team well, like you're not just going to, if you don't know how to use your players and your talent, you might just, be drafting someone first overall and burning their career, before they even walk through the door. Right. So that, like, ownership being smart and well run, an important aspect of this. And we want, with any system, we want all players to have an opportunity to feel like they can come into the league and be successful, or sign with a team and be successful. It's not a part of the job that we really have a direct interaction with, how teams like run their businesses. But, I agree with you on the structural side of things regardless. I'm not going to give you like, yes, we want a salary cap. That's obviously not going to be my position out of any gate. So like, that's not going to happen. But I do agree with you on the structural side.
You would be bad at your job if you said that.
I would. If I said we would like a salary cap and we would also never go on strike. Like these, I would be probably prosecuted by someone pretty quickly. So that, but I do agree with you on the structure
and the health of the league, and like the salary cap. Guys, this product, the LCS, is not on an upward trajectory. So things need to change in order for it to be sustainable in the long term, right? We can't just keep doing business this way because it's going down, guys. It's going down. So
I agree with you that even when we came into the league on EG side, like we saw a lot of complacency. There had been a lot of complacency. I'm hopeful that people are, more active and more invested. I'm on the team owner side. I talk with team owners, but I'm not in their meetings, but getting proactive about how to, do what's best for the league and improve the league. That's where my focus is. I put a lot of effort in Champions Queue because when I was on the team side and when I've talked to players and when I talk to, when I see the community react after every World's, embarrassment, one of the biggest things people talk about is like our players are in a substandard training environment. Like it discourages good imports. It worsens imports when they get here. It makes domestic players not develop how they should, and so we addressed that and we worked, to get progress on that. Like I'm going to take all the steps I can in my position supporting players to try and improve the condition of the league, to try and improve that. And a part of that, frankly, does come back to group rights and the structures and incentives that we have to go out and commercialize players in a way that creates fandom. Like we talked about with trading cards, like when you have not just being excited that JoJo's coming in as a rookie, but when you're involved in basketball or baseball trading cards and, you got a LeBron James rookie card and that thing's worth money and you saw it gain, then 10 years later, guess what you're going to care about? You're going to be trying to figure out which pick do I want to get that rookie card from because it's going to be worth something someday. And you're investing in, again, the developmental space. You're watching the early players come through because you're excited. Like it's the same way as how sports gambling has come in and we know that sports betting is a huge part of traditional sports and the excitement a lot of people associate. Like having a stake in the game in some way as a fan is important to a lot of people. And that can be as simple as a trading card. Like there's a lot of story and narrative to be said about that, to be said about other structural items. And I know that we can do more and should be doing more to help build player brands and build the next generation of player brands that really pushes the LCS back up to the top and really creates that excitement that, was really palpable, 3 or 4 years ago. And it should be insulated from World's performance, like Monty's saying. Like, we should have a healthy league that is competitive and has exciting players. We know we have exciting players. We need to market them and create that excitement so that our domestic league can be everything it can be, regardless of World's performance. And we also want to do well at Worlds. And I'm going to say, for the record, we can do well at Worlds. And if we do, it's because my name is Aram.
By the way, on the topic, obviously this can be for any of the leagues and associations you're aware of. Could be NFL, NBA, whatever. When they have do the players that play in the NFL, for example, are they actually allowed themselves to post footage of themselves, say, on their Instagram? Do they have to have some sort of does the NFL have to sign off? And how does that work? Do they have some sharing, like their likeness rights in the actual game for the footage?
Again, I will hedge to the part that I'm not an expert, pure and simple, on every piece of this. There's a few pieces. There are a few sections of this, though, that are like assumed rights or pieces that have been litigated in arbitration. For instance, like one question, you talk about the shakedown. I will not comment on any of that. I was not privy or experienced to it, and I have a good relationship with my contemporaries at the CSPPA today, and I believe that they're out there trying to do their best today. Won't speak to anything in the past. But when you talk about shakedown,
to be fair, the shaker downer left, so It might have changed.
But I stay away from it regardless. But to that point of the idea of a shakedown, there is settled law through arbitration in traditional sports that I've gone through with our legal side about, well, what are the implied rights of participating in the league? Like, we're not going to be able to shake down Riot and say, hey, we got the group rights. You can't broadcast a game because players playing it.
Yes.
There's those things are baked in through arbitration that have said, if you are playing in the league, you are by proxy agreeing to participate in the inherent promotion and publishing of league things. So
there would be a sense of justice if you did that, though, because Riot can turn around and say you can't broadcast our intellectual property because they own the title. So maybe
I'm alluding
fair on that one.
The reason I wondered why is because I think, look, I understand more sponsorship for athletes anywhere outside the game. It's not like LeBron's run around in the game with a big Nike. Like, it's just the shoes he wears in the game is like an implied sponsorship, right? But the problem I see for esports people, again, is that in esports, the game dev is God in terms of in the game. Like, if people don't know, Riot essentially, it's actually one of the few things they do that I'd give them some credit for being magnanimous. They're not obliged to give us, for example, on this channel, the rights to show footage from the game. They can absolutely copyright strike the video and it would be upheld by Google/YouTube, and that would be the end. Like, the channel would get a strike. So I wondered if it was that much different, or if in sports, for example, like Julio Jones can't put a video of himself if the NFL really wanted to be arseholes. I don't know, how does that work?
Yeah, I'm not an expert, so it's hard for me to say, but my understanding is there would be a generally allowed permission to to use that in personal use, or especially anything that can be considered promotion of the league. That's a big part of the collaborative work that's done in traditional sports, is that you may be restricting group rights for players in commercial purposes, but if it has to do with promoting the league and the health and the wellness and the popularity of the league, like those things are mutually agreed upon at every one of those leagues that everybody participates. So I think to me that speaks no differently, but I'm not an expert to that extent on that minutia.
Fair enough.
We do have. I do want to take a question here that Papa Smithy asked, because he's the GM.
Right, how many God coin does he own? Tell him if you buy 25 God coin, he can ask any question he wants. Listen, mate, if your friends, you always patronise. You don't go to your mate's restaurant and just go free in it. All you can eat, guys. Like, you fucking pay. So there you go. He's got 100 teams money. I fucking have Nade Shot drop 10 shit rip-off Yeezy fucking jackets and say there's only 10 in the world, and then sell an NFT of Papa Smithy wear one. There you go. You just paid $10 million. You buy fucking 25 God coin. Okay, yeah, ask him the question or whatever. We'll humor this one.
We'll humor this one. How does Phil respond to the reality that there are players who would rather play for top academy teams than bottom LCS teams, and everything that implies?
Look, it's not the CSPPA's fault. Yeah. No one wants to play for fucking TSM, Monty. That's if they want to play in an academy squad, a more competitive team with better practice conditions and good teammates. That's exactly their own right. Sorry, I got a bit lost there. You go for it.
I see the Thorin. Yeah, I see my time. Go ahead. But I think you capture a lot of it quite well, and I think it dovetails back to what I brought up before, which is complacency or teams not operating properly. If a player in the NBA buyout market would rather take the minimum salary to play for a team that has a roster that's contending for a championship than to sign with the Houston Rockets right now, like that is their prerogative, and that is a part of this wonderful capitalist free market economy we have, right? It's controlled through collective bargaining in these situations, but at the end of the day, like a player has agency to say that this team's providing more value for me or is creating something, and we have no, if to us that's a matter of the teams need to address. If you are a team, if this situation's true, where a player would rather sign with someone's academy than play for your LCS team, then you have a serious, problem to be solving internally. How do we change our dynamics? Maybe you need to go do what we did at EG for a minute and make a Godfather offer to Chovy and make a bunch of people believe very quickly that we were willing to do what was necessary to compete. I don't know, but like when we came in, we had that same problem at EG of trying to figure out how do we make people believe that we are genuinely here to compete? How do we attract talent? How do we make them feel that we really are actually going to do things necessary? Like you have to have a player focus, and if any team, if any team wants to be successful, they have to ask those hard questions of themselves and try and figure out the solution for them. But again, that comes down to teams needing to do their jobs and provide value and be competitive.
I would actually say, by the way, the Chovy example of EG trying to sign Chovy, and if people don't know, people like Cloud9 tried it as well, Team Liquid have tried to get Faker, these big deals of the I would actually say that's a perfect example of why actually the work ahead of you is absolutely necessary for the NA/LCS ecosystem, because you're in a bad state of affairs. Because here's the problem, fans might not know this. Chovy didn't go to the LPL. Like, it's not like he was making so many bazillions. It was like, well, what's the difference between, $1 million here and 1.5 in LCS? No, like I've heard the amounts that were offered by some of these NA teams to some of these players could be like 3 times what they'd make in Korea. So if the player's not even like truly ever considered it, because so far we haven't really had like a proper one of those players come over at their peak when they're the biggest name. That implies
we were close, genuinely close.
That implies there's something wrong with the ecosystem, though,
having like very like sweating brow conversations about like, did we just fuck up because we might actually pull this off? Like conversations, which I agree with you. Like, the money that would have been paid for Chovy, it's a a remarkable amount. So there's it's an incredible swing to go for any team that does it. But yeah, it's like that. Those are just those are realities. And again, like back to the point of Rob Smithy. Every team needs to figure out what they can do to be competitive. Some teams try very different methods. You have FlyQuest, who are doing really well in the standings right now. And also they put a lot of work into differentiating themselves from a brand standpoint and really focusing on who they were, what their identity was from that standpoint, even above and beyond their competitive side. And like, those things, like people showing thoughtfulness about how they operate, like, that people are responsive to that. Like every team is doing something different and working in a way to be successful. And if you're struggling to the point where you're not able to sign a player over an academy, another team's academy, like you really need to probably, put some deep thought into how you can swing that around.
I would also say, by the way, just for this specific example, because remember, it was a specific question, Monty. It wasn't just from the ether. It was Papa Smithy from 100 Thieves. So all I would say is this, I remember a guy who was playing for 100 Thieves. He was a starter. He was called Puma, and everyone was going fucking mental. You never could hear shut the fuck up for about 2 weeks while he was good. So once the beginner's luck ran out, right, he went off and fucked off to another lower team. So I will just say, disclaimer, if you're one of the top teams that does really well in LCS, I have noticed they also run a sideline that goes like this. While I myself will be constantly abusing the import rules and trying to get green cards for imports and stack as many talents as possible, I think all the other teams in the league should really buy all this NA talent up that teams like mine and Cloud9 have raised. I think really it's disgraceful that the top academy teams are ended up with them like my academy team, and that these lower teams like CLG don't want to finish 10th but pay me for the honour of playing with that player who I definitely don't fucking want on my team, but please buy him. So I'll just say, like, look, I actually think Papa Smithy's speaking, he's got good intentions, but I'm getting a bit sick of that from the big NA orgs. Their whole byline of like, everyone should really buy American. I'll be getting an import myself, of course, but I've got one you could buy here. So look, it's fucking Palafox. Wouldn't you like him? He's very good. Like, give me a break, mate. Come on. How about this, guys? You put your money where your mouth is, and we'll see what you actually believe.
Well, I think also, Phil, like it's important to discuss that the deck was stacked against certain LCS teams from being able to field competitive offers because there were clauses in the LCS contracts that said that players couldn't get equity unless they had been for 3 years with the team. Is that correct?
Yeah, there were restrictions like that. We're very much disentangling equity as much as possible. So yes, that is, those were things that were in play.
But here's the thing. Sure. Let's say, but here, if you're a new team, so you're new at franchising, you come in and your evil geniuses, well, you can't have had a player for 3 years, so you can't offer equity. So how do you compete with teams that can? Like it was the deck was stacked against a lot of these franchise teams.
That was a feature, not a bug,
these deals.
That was
in
a
the first
feature, not a
place.
bug.
Oh, I know, but it's just so like
Sure.
I feel like chastising the teams is kind of
Oh,
ridiculous
of
because
sure.
you know they couldn't make the kind of long-term investments in players by giving them equity that many of the teams in the league could, which then helps you attract other players because you say, oh, we've got this guy on a 3-year deal now because and he, you know, we're building the team around him because he owns part of the company, so all boats rise if he gets more popular, right? So there was a real fucking issue with being able for a lot of these teams with being able to do that in the first place.
Any thoughts?
I thought it was. I mean, I think it was well said. Honestly, like I don't really have, you know, a take on that as the equity side of things is already something that's being, you know, being peeled back, as I think people have realized very quickly. When we came in, we got Cloud9 players who had equity deals.
Should be ideally. Where do you want to push the line to ideally on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally a believer that player equity, I mean, as in traditional sports, like is something that is problematic at best, and you know, there's a lot of education gap at the very least with players about how, especially in privately held companies, like what's your capacity to exit. You know, like the company's valued at this, you're getting this much equity, but like in a real market situation, how can you, like, that stuff is so like mystifying that to make sure that a player has proper education on it would one be a burden for us to make sure we do it, but also again brings into question of how can a player transfer from team to team, how can a player be a genuine part of a bargaining unit if they also have a stake on the other side. Like, you know, I think it raises more issues than it solves. And if a player has value equal to something like that, why are you not presenting it in the form of a standard like contractual language and monetary value? Like that's, you know, that's the case we see. And, you know, you see in traditional sports when players retire, sometimes if they have a great relationship with an organization, like they go into management, they go into an ownership stake, like those things occur. And I think, you know, in my experience, that's the best way to handle it. And, you know, hopefully, especially you speak to the problem, Monty, of how some teams enter the league at a disadvantage. You go into collective bargaining. Again, many of the things that are solved in collective bargaining are setting a clear set of playing field rules for everybody involved, including new entrants into the game who are buying into slots or getting expansion slots, or whatever the case may be. So it's not just a benefit to players. It's not just a salary cap benefit to teams. Setting rules of play, setting clear expectations are benefits to everybody in any workplace. I should put my general labor hat on. Like every workplace benefits from clearly defined expectations and well understood rules where everybody has a voice at the table. So, you know, that's that.
One thing, by the way, I'll give you credit for is actually just appearing on the episode in itself. Like one of the problems we've had, by the way, in CSGO is there are no shows like this with CSPPA. Like you never get interface between people who have questions or even just want to know what their real plans are beyond, like, you know, business meetings and PR statements. And so I would hope in the future as well, it's the same with the commissioner of the LCS in general. Like in my opinion, there's another area esports has to level up compared to sports. Like whatever you might think of the NFL, Roger Goodell has to stand in front of that shower of shit of all the people criticising him and asking him all the questions. And why did this player? He has to even answer stuff that's nothing to do with him. Why did a player do this and that? I hope in esports we at least get people, at a minimum, at least field the questions, for fuck's sake. You know, how you answer them is up to you, of course.
For sure, as coyly as possible, most of the time. But I genuinely do say, and I said this when I started, like, I want people to tweet at us when they want us to have an answer about something, and I want to be held accountable to respond. And I want people to tell me, like, you missed the boat on this. You know, we're working on a 1 year in review sort of thing for a couple months from now to look at what we actually did, where we worked, where we made some mistakes. And like, for sure, one of the areas is like, you know, we improved on the PA's previous grade on how they were doing at communicating, but we still fell way short of the bar. We missed a couple boats. We were late on a couple, and like trying to be more accountable to the public is the best thing we can do, especially because, you know, like many of our players get their best information through Twitter, through Reddit, through social media. So we're not just speaking to fans or to the public and being accountable there. We're being accountable to many of our members to make sure that they understand what's going on for themselves as well. So, you know, it's something that we know we have to keep doing more of. And, you know, tweet at me anytime or message me if you ever have something you want us to talk about. And, you know, like if I say no and like I don't want to talk about it, you know, put out a tweet, screen cap me and say, like, you know, this guy's being a punk and not, like, you know, not doing what he said.
By the way, I also do think that's an area where pro players themselves do need education and need to understand the function of the association. Because I tell you what, in CSGO, I get so sick of pro players. Sometimes, dude, even the people on the board of the CSPPA doing tweets like, why is this still going on? And you're like, that's literally a matter for the CSPPA. Why are you tweeting about it is my question. Like, shouldn't you? I hope you've at least gone to them with this matter. That's, you know, that's what they're going to do about it.
For sure. We do a lot of work to try and build norms for players to come to us before they go to Twitter. We kind of like stack like when you have an issue, we're talking to amateur players. We did amateur sessions as one of our projects this year, to talk to players before they get an LCS contract. And one of the things is like, when you have an issue, like, you should come to us first, or your representative, lawyer or agent or otherwise, like one of these two bars. And then, like, if those things aren't available or fail you, like, maybe then the league, and then, like, and then at the very bottom of this is like going public on social. Like, this is, an important tool for you to have in your arsenal as a person with a brand, but also it should be the last one you pull out, and you should make sure that you've exhausted the others first. Like, let us come do the work for you, because again, if we can, help solve the problem behind the scenes, it builds power for not just you, but for everybody. So yeah, that's active effort to make sure people.
I'm going to echo that sentiment completely of the order as well, because I tell you one thing. I'll even use Richard as an example. People might be shocked by this, but there are many cases I know of where Richard had like information about something going on, and he goes privately to the party and sometimes resolves it, and it never ever has to come out. So a fan obviously only sees when we go public, so they might think that people like us just instantly go to the Twitter with everything. No, actually, usually it's exactly like you said. If we have to go to Twitter with it, that's probably there is no behind the scenes movement on this issue, and now we effectively have to weaponize the public. That's the last sort of tactic left.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go on. No. Go ahead, Phil. That's fine.
I was just gonna say, there's a good example of this. Before my time, there was the Solo Fide situation. An amateur org that wasn't paying players, and that ended up being a public spat. The players, never got money. Everything kind of went out. They ran out of the scene and all that business. We had players who, after amateur sessions, came to us because we said, like, if you aren't getting paid, or if you have not signed a contract but someone promised you, like, tell us. Players come to us and say, yeah, like, I'm in a situation, it feels pretty spooky. They said they're going to be a contract. They haven't actually done it. I've been playing for them for 6 weeks and they haven't been paid. And what we did was, the public never saw any of this, because we went to Riot and we talked to our partners who I meet with regularly, and we said, hey, like, we want to flag this stuff. These teams, can you go talk to those teams and get them to make sure that they do right by their players today, and like, we had to get this resolved, and we got that stuff resolved. So it never had to go public. Players never had to put themselves on the line. Every time a player says something publicly, they're potentially harming their potential to get a next job, because players are constantly labeled malcontents and problems if they speak to like issues that they're experiencing in public. So we got to protect players in a couple of ways in that situation. And it's all about communication, getting ahead of things, getting information before it becomes too big to manage. So
yeah, and I was going to ask, because there wasn't really an organic juncture to kind of fit this question in, and I know it's probably a tough one for you to answer based on what you've already kind of alluded to, but to what extent do you believe the CSPPA has been a failure? Because, and the reason I ask that is, certainly in its previous iteration, I can't speak for where it's at now, does seem to be mostly anonymous, if I'm being honest with you. But, in the past, obviously me and Duncan publicly criticized it. It cost me a friendship that I held in very high regard to do that, because, one of the people involved in creating it was sort of immensely proud of its sort of historic significance. So, but for me, when I look at it, I think, first of all, they've engaged in a number of shady things directly back in the Mads Urland era, sort of running an agency stealth to the side and using information acquired through the union talks to run that agency, to interfere with stuff kind of on an individual contractual basis rather than a collective basis. Sort of felt a bit out of pocket. And then on top of that, they've been absent for a number of big issues. It's not just playing after midnight, which you might be able to make an argument about. That's just going to happen in esports because esports is shit, right? But like, at the end of the day, they felt strongly enough to codify it.
Yeah.
So you then have to live by your own code.
It's treated as a historic, moment, and like really important.
Exactly.
So they put all the importance behind it.
And if I look at their activity now, I mean, at one point they did have some of the most powerful players in NA in Europe as the representation on the board. Now I would say that caliber of player that's on the board, no disrespect to the players, it's less. They don't have as big brands. They're not as powerful voices. And you even have one example famously saying, hey, there was nothing we could do about ESL taking away player slots from NA orgs and from European orgs. They'd earned the slots. ESL just took them away and said, we're restructuring. Fuck you. And obviously that org, that slot for that org had a lot of value. And, the CSPPA said, there's nothing we can do about it. And coincidentally, ESL are the ones that are paying the piper. So, I mean, for me, I think overall, I think it's been a big failure and it's really let down a lot of people compared to its early promise.
Yeah, I think I would say first off, I have a great relationship with Mykles, the current I think he's executive director. I'm not sure if that's his title there. Contemporary. We meet every couple of weeks, same as I've been doing everywhere else. One of the first things I did was reach out to him and try and set up conversations. And I didn't have a lot of information on the CSPPA aside from what, as a team owner, I experienced during their initial push for group rights and the things that they had been doing at the time. And so I've learned a lot. I talked with Sir Scoots quite a bit about it as well, especially in my early days, because coming to the job, it would be silly of me not to talk to the other people who have done this thing, both Hal on PA side and understand where everyone had experienced. I would say that my words of wisdom about the CSPPA is that I do not envy their job. Like, I have a much easier job than they have in so many ways, and is why this job was really appealing to me. And I'm not afraid to say I'm happy to take the easier job, because I like the pathways for us to succeed are much more straightforward. They have one inherent problem, which is that they're dealing with players from many countries playing for teams from many countries around the world. We have everybody in the United States, everyone in California to that matter as well. So we deal under not only just one country's set of laws, but also one state's set of laws. That's an enormous advantage.
And also a finite number of teams as opposed to all the players and teams constantly coming up in CS, and it's an ever-shifting landscape. Very difficult, for sure.
Yes, we have a fixed number of teams. Almost all of our players are are English language. Obviously a number of imports, but it's the breadth of CS is wide. It's like you said, there's new coming and going, and it's very hard. We also have a publisher who's very involved and clearly has some investment in the PA and its value and purpose. We've obviously talked about the conflicts and issues with that inherent at the outset, but there is an inherent advantage to having an involved developer, a third party that we can work through. Like I said, we're more of a pyramid fighting up to lobby with that developer, whereas they came into an immediately adversarial situation, like direct adversarial, where it's them having to compete against the team owners directly. That's a much harder situation. They also came in with no money in the bank. Our money in the bank came with, I wouldn't say it came with strings. I wasn't there before, but it came with questions, and clear conflicts. And I came in with, money in the bank that was now devoid of those parameters. No future funding coming, no ongoing relationship. It gave me a huge, having a runway, having months to just do good work and just try and do the best things we can for people without anything except for attempting to show that we can bring value. What a fucking privilege that is compared to the CSPPA, who day one had to figure out how do we pay the people who are going to make this thing happen. Tackling group rights on day one when you've provided no clear value and you're battling uphill against teams that do have a lot of inherent threat around where their revenues come from. It's so much more challenging. They had they had challenges. They had issues with the optics around how that stuff worked. I will say, genuinely from the team side, I saw many conversations in the team owner circles that were, pushing narratives actively and trying to submarine the work of the CSPPA. Whatever conflicts they may have had were amplified by a very active and proactive group of owners who didn't want it to succeed. That,
Sure.
Those things are.
There was anything they were unfair about? Do you have anything?
That was difficult for us as well, by the way, because I recognize no team owners want a powerful player union. I mean, that goes without saying, right? So our critique of the CSPPA was kind of tempered with that understanding that we could be carrying water for bad actors, essentially.
Sure, and there's I think to your question, Thorin, I think there's the conflation that quickly comes between articulating a clear conflict of interest, like Riot funding the PA, the idea that people who are running the PA and collecting the rights are also people benefiting financially from the rights as the agents selling against them. That is an obvious apparent conflict out of the gate, but it's also a visible one. They conflated that then with, well, if what this is happening is is potentially look at this thing, we don't have proof that anything untoward is happening, even though it's obvious there's a conflict here. We also let's then say that, well, the nature of group rights and collecting group rights is unethical in itself. There were many posts when the group rights came out. Their group rights agreement was basically a 1-to-1 of the NFL group rights agreement, most powerful sports league in North America. This is the law of the land in this sport, and I'm seeing attacks against it ad hominem as a component of this sort of tied adjacent to the to those to the conflicts of the group running the association that are driving at the idea that, well, if they're bad, then this thing must be bad too, and people are attacking the credibility of the group license. When I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is this is something that was vetted by some really some people who make a lot more money than everybody having the conversation, who have worked together and built something that's existed around this for dozens of years, right? So clearly, this document in and of itself is not unethical, but you had people those kinds of plays getting credibility, and this is where conflicts of interest are a problem, right? When I came in, I didn't want to have a conflict of interest, because when you leave those doors open, you create the possibility for your work to be questioned beyond the merits of what's actually being put out. It's why we're trying to be really transparent coming forward out of the face of this. We know there was backlash around CSPPA. We know we have to have a public conversation. We've signed 0 players to a group rights agreement today. We're announcing the partnership. We're going to be presenting the group rights agreement in the coming days, but we were really thoughtful of saying we're not going to sign people preemptively, because we don't want anyone to perceive that we're attempting to do something behind closed doors or hidden. We want to have the public conversation because we know history and what is right is on our side here in terms of how and why this should exist. And we're welcoming the public conversation to make sure that everyone, including our players, feel good about what they're participating in. So that answers it. I skewed into pitching my own thing, I will admit, but I did say where I thought there was unfairness towards the CSPPA. So hopefully that is remembered too. I'm not very good at being.
But do you think overall it's kind of failed to hit its key goals, is the question?
Well, I think those things put them way behind the 8 ball for sure. I don't know what their key goals are because I'm not in the room with them, but I know that Mykles has worked to try and put together programs for mental health and otherwise that I think are real positives. They may not be some of the things that people look to. We get calls. I'm sure they get the same calls, like unionize, right? And obviously we have to do some education about. Well, it's maybe a little harder than it looks, but I see the same calls for doing more for players, fighting for players' rights more. And so I look with a lot of empathy towards, well, if you get that far behind the 8 ball and you're just trying to keep the lights on, how do you get to a place where you can keep the lights on and get back to the advocacy work that you're supposed to be prioritizing? How do you disentangle from any conflicts or any, past strategies to keep your lights on that weren't actually working or were putting you, further behind your goals that, are the fundamental purpose of your PA? So, I have a lot of empathy for them. I think that they would likely say that, they wish that they could have done more, and they wish that they maybe could have done things differently at the beginning to be more successful. And I have also the privilege, which I missed, which is seeing what they did. I had an older sister who got yelled at by my parents and had a million fights and all that stuff, and I got to sit 4 years younger and watch all that stuff play out and learn from it and try and do it better. So, we're doing our best to not take that for granted on our side. But yeah, I think it's hard going first, and, I give them props for doing it. And I'm glad I wasn't the one that had to do it.
I'll also say, even though I agree with Richard's premise, you certainly had to question, are we essentially helping battle the players here when you criticise the CSPPA?
It was tough.
But the thing is, though, I think that's we were absolutely honest in what we knew. The problem here is only one side would speak to us, which was the Team Orgs. The players not only had no one to properly represent them, they were just sort of you'd have to talk to, I don't even know who, or this person, or we can bring it up in a board meeting. And then, as I said, there was no front-facing person. There was no community person who's trusted, and we know we've had conversations and dialogue, who could come on shows like this, and you can just put the matter to them, and then they can give their side. Again, you don't have to agree. There's no it's not like a fucking meeting where you have to at the end come to a conclusion. But I think they did themselves a disservice by not even. Basically, the best way to describe a lot of the ill will towards CSPPA from the fans, not from the players or the Team Orgs, in my opinion, comes down to the way they framed that infamous open letter that they did in 2020, where essentially the gist of it sounded like, we don't have to do anything except the literal wording of this contract, fuck you, pay us. That ain't a great look, Instead, what you would have wanted to do is, again, have some sort of community liaison person that's known that when they come into a conversation like this, they wouldn't be seen as a corporate figure who only cares. They would. Then you could get into the ideas and the meat of the topics and what are they doing and what are the problems and even some things you're saying, maybe there's disingenuous framing by the owners, But from my perspective, they essentially just allowed a vacuum to exist because they wouldn't put themselves forwards. And yeah, plenty of people have filled that with information, which in your case, maybe it's misinformation, disinformation, whatever angle you want to take on it.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think it's totally fair. I mean, getting how you communicate to the public and to your contemporaries, right, is it's fucking hard, and we're trying to do a good job of it. We'll see how we do. I've been talking to you guys for 2.5 hours. I haven't looked at my Twitter, so maybe I've made some great misstep and I've been canceled in the midst of this. But we'll have to wait and see.
I think, it'll be us that gets cancelled.
Yeah, I think you're out of everybody on this call, you're the least likely.
Yeah, I've got a special fucking bot set up. The cancel alarm just goes off. All right, it's fucking Wednesday. Let's go.
Yeah, no, I told you. You all knew. I mean, probably doesn't know, but I was flying back home this morning before this show, and we launched while I was in flight. So there was a world in which I was not on social when we launched, and so there were many jokes about the lady who flew up and said a bunch of really offensive tweets, and then by the time she landed, she had been fired when her phone service came back on. So there were definitely some jokes about my fate of being in the air when the big announcement dropped. So I'm glad to have survived at least the first hour. Again, we'll see how it goes, but I feel good, and I've been honestly really I'd probably say humbled again. My dictionary is limited today apparently, but by a lot of people in the community who have come out and put faith in what we're doing here, both from seeing OneTeam or seeing myself, and giving us a chance at what we're doing here because they have some belief in me or us, and so that's get a little dusty, honestly.
All right, final questions, guys, before we do some viewer questions.
Yeah, none. Just listen. My overall read on it, and I said it to the guys, sort of just before you arrived. I think overall, in terms of the steps that have been taken for the League of Legends players and the Player Association, I think up until this point, it has been massively underwhelming. They haven't achieved a great deal. And honestly, the players even seemed sort of disinterested in setting and achieving any goals. So, I mean, at least for the commercial aspects, I think this is going to be good to kind of wrest back some of the power that sits with players, actors rather, that don't have the players' interests at heart. It's very hard for me to sort of critique anything about this, and just sort of I'll have to see how it kind of plays out in practice. But in general, I think compared to some of the other attempts at associations and unionizations we've seen, at least this one is laser focused on what it wants to achieve and the group it wants to achieve it for. Be interested to see if we can get an equivalent in LEC. I don't know if that's possible or a goal or something anyone's thought about, but other than that, I wish you guys all the best and I hope that the players get what they deserve.
Sounds almost like a threat at the end there, but
yeah,
I'll take it in a positive way.
One way or the other, right? One way or the other, always.
They get what they have coming to them.
Yeah, exactly. Which actually, I think is generally good. They should make more money. Yeah.
That was really just final thoughts. He didn't really have a question, so I'll actually spin what he said into a question. Actually, maybe you could address that. If they were to attempt something like this in LEC, would the fact that it's all those countries and team orgs are different, do you think that would make it trickier than the LCS?
I mean, if everybody's EU, you have the governing body of the EU, which could potentially simplify matters there. I'm not a lawyer in America, and I'm definitely sure shit not one in Europe. So, but they base out of Berlin, so again, being centrally located from a league standpoint is probably really advantageous. But I'm not an expert in European labor law, but Europe's got a lot more progressive thinking labor laws to begin with, so the European folks have some improved baselines from what players in the US have, especially around protections, contract guarantees, and things of that nature. So I have not had conversations with LEC folks who I've talked with players in other games, haven't talked to anybody in LEC about interest. I try and advise or support anybody who's trying to organize players in any game. So if anybody wants to talk, open invitation. You can always message me on Twitter and we can start a conversation or talk to one of our players. But I'm happy to provide any advice for anybody who wants to try and take steps. And we're hopeful that this will be something that's really good for our players, really good for our league, and that it will help to paint set a roadmap for other people to do similarly. I think it's easiest to duplicate that roadmap that we create in North America because, for obvious reasons, but we have a very specific set of rules we're playing under. But people around the world organize all the time and can and should, in our opinion. So
I have a question for Monty, actually. Since Monty has previously, didn't you say you did an interview with the guy who did his job before him? Okay, so it's even, I think, is it on this channel or is it on Cloud9's, did you say?
It's on Cloud9's channel.
Right, okay, so Michael, the reason I have a question for you, Monty, is because as people will know, depending on what group you put humans in, they automatically organize in a different hierarchies, right? So even though if you put Monty into a Travis show, suddenly he's the villain and the skeptical one, and he's got all these dark machinations. In this show, he becomes obviously like eternal fucking optimism of Monty's otherwise jaded esports mind. So he always somehow, right, finds the light, and the guy does have the good intentions, and I believe it can work, and they'll do it. But my problem is this, Monty. If this is the guy who's the Messiah, this is the one who's going to fix it all. Didn't you say that about the last guy? Wasn't he? Or weren't all metrics pointing up for him? Wasn't he a cool guy? Didn't the convo seem to be going? So I want to ask you, how is this different?
Monty, let me step in here. For you. Like, you cannot look back at hot takes. Okay, that is not fair. Like, only the newest, most recent hot take matters. So please do not answer this question, Monty.
Okay.
You don't need
from the side official there. I think he actually also reffed that fucking Bengals game, didn't he? But whatever. Anyway, keep going. Keep going.
I think the difference with Hal is that between Phillip and Hal, and as you know, like, I have a strong sense of endemic people needing to lead the charge because they understand the issues better. And I think while Hal had experience coming in from traditional sports, I don't know if he was fully motivated to solve the issues of the LCS players. I think he had good intentions, but maybe lacked the confidence of the players or the deep industry knowledge necessary to make them care about things that I think the current group has. It was also, I think, just Hal, basically, and now there's a bunch of other people, including, like, Snoop is on the board now. So, I mean, he comes from a place, and Snoop has always advocated for a players union and has been a professional player himself. So there's a lot more people involved right now, and there wasn't this partnership with OneTeam to commercialize it. And I feel honestly that, Hal just probably didn't know how to weave together all of the different elements that needed to be worked on, or have relationships with the players like Phillip does from his time at Evil Geniuses or the coaches. So I think it's a good thing that he's come on and that they've been able to bring these external partners on and bring on more people onto the board as well. So I think to me, it looks a lot more serious than it did, whereas, like, it felt that Hal had good intentions, but maybe not the motivation or knowledge in order to execute all of the initiatives that are being executed now.
I wondered if it was going to trigger you there, Richard, because if people don't know, Snoopy was the original person, even before Richard, who said, like, I'm going to make a player association. Now I've retired because players really need it. By the way, no joke, this is in like 2015 or something mental, like 7-8 years ago. And if you don't know, this was one of the early examples where I learned that Richard Lewis doesn't miss, because he did tell me behind the scenes that association will never occur. He will never be the leader of it. And this is all just, essentially, once you've finished hearing him talk about it, you've heard the end of it. That it's a pitch that he's that sort of guy. But because if people don't know, when Richard was trying to set up a CSGO one himself, it's just about, as we found out in this episode, it's about 1,000 times more complicated than people think.
Yeah, there was a ton of legal stuff that stopped mine, and I was trying to do it with two divisions, so an American division and a European division, and immediately you just run into, on the American side, everything's just a corrupt nightmare, so it's like, you can't be this unless you pay this, and you do this, and you need a lawyer for that, and they've set up this system that's just so fucking convoluted, because I think Americans have like a weird view of like unionization compared to Europe, right? In Europe, it wasn't as sort of legally complicated, but then it was jurisdictionally complicated because, unlike in League, everyone's based in like Berlin essentially, but like in CS, everyone just plays where the fuck they play. So I gotta take Danish stuff into consideration, not as much German stuff, but a little bit of that with them, like OneTeam, and so yeah, it was really complicated. And I knew, listen, I like Snoopy. Obviously, I've known him a long time, and he's a good lad to have a drink with. Now that I'm a jaded old asshole, he is one of those guys. Like, I'm mystified at how he sort of keeps like blunder, like knowing the dude. Like, I'm always mystified how he blunders into these roles and he gets to make these proclamations and it never quite happens. And yet he gets hired to do another thing and another thing and another thing. And I see tons of people like this in esports where it's like there is a committee of, it's like the mafia of the mediocre, and they just sort of get to do incredible projects, but they never quite hit their goals. They never quite achieve what they want to do, and everyone pretends they did, and then they get another job for an extra fucking digit on their salary, and they just rinse and fucking repeat. You know,
exactly.
Nick Allen's fucking at it again today with an announcement. All this upcomer bullshit. Like we really have a competency crisis in this industry, and until we fix that, almost everything is suspect.
Yeah, I want to defend Snoopé, and
I'm not really criticizing him.
A stray for my friend Nick Allen as well here. To be honest,
for that Bitcoin tweet though, because I sometimes go back to that Bitcoin tweet anytime I need like a sensible chuckle. It's
hilarious.
It
is hilarious, hilarious tweet, and let's all give him credit for owning it consistently and knowing
he hasn't deleted it.
He eats it. But like, you know, I think. Like as a part, like I ran Evil Geniuses for a long time. I inherited that company from Alex Garfield, a legend in the space who built a juggernaut, and I inherited something that had a lot of warts and flaws and issues, and you know, just keeping it alive was every breath I took. You know, like for 5 years was just keeping the thing alive and keeping it from turning into a corpse. And like, you know, that like if you look, like there's no one who's going to say the job I did at Evil Genius is better than the job Alex Garfield did at Evil Geniuses. But I know from the inside that I had a lot of people who worked really hard with a lot of constraints that couldn't be seen publicly that made things happen. And I think, you know, it's not fair to judge someone who is putting themselves out there in the front always of a thing, and who maybe comes in with great intentions and works really hard and runs into unforeseen obstacles and moves on. Doesn't necessarily that they're doing a bad job. The world is a fucking hard place, and sometimes projects don't work out the way you want them to. But I would stand for either of those guys and the work that they put in. And, you know, they're both people who I rely on a great deal for support and information. And, you know, I would be glad to go to war with either of them any day. And I do so currently with Snoopé on a regular basis. So it's, you know, I think that is what I would say is, you know, be critical of people and hold us accountable when we fail, but also, you know, people got to work, and hard work doesn't always mean success.
Just an old bitter man. I lash out at everyone now, and I
appreciate it.
I like Snoopy, and you know, listen, he's always had like a great mind. He's a great people person. I can see a lot of benefits to having him involved in a project like this. So you know, best of luck to him and everybody involved.
What's full of shit with that union 7 years ago though?
Yeah, he was. He was.
Just keeping score. That's all I'm doing.
He was going to do it, and I ran into problems. Yeah. So you know, maybe I'm full of shit too. You know,
yeah, Richard shit too. Yep, all shit.
Also, Thorin, to your point about this iteration of the union has actually done something, which is what we're talking about today. I never saw any announcement during the Hal Biagas era of anything. So the fact that things are happening, I guess.
What do you mean? That was that incredible thing about streaming in houses. What are you talking about? They got the W. They got allowed to stream in houses, and then decided they didn't. And all the players decided they didn't want to.
It's hilarious.
Because they're fucking mental weaklings.
I know, it's hilarious. I know.
Thank you for the credit.
So we've already at least seen movement, and I think we'll probably, especially with the OneTeam on the commercial side, probably continue to see movement because they already have existing partners and relationships. So I imagine that the business will be coming, and then therefore, hopefully, it'll be self-funded, and then we'll see additional movement.
Yeah, movement. Name of the game.
That's what I got. All
Just
right,
keep moving.
Let's wrap it up here, guys. We're gonna very quickly change over to me, Richard, and Thorin, and take some viewer questions at the end of the episode before we finish up. Thank you, Phillip, for coming on. It's been lovely to hear about this.
Yeah, it's been fun to talk to you guys. Thanks for having me. Call me back anytime you need to hold my feet to the fire.
We're back with viewer questions. For Grog coin holders, go to the Inside on Esports Discord, where you can talk to people about esports, and also go to the Grog coin channel and figure out how to get involved. We appreciate our Grog coin holders and also insult them from time to time. So, first up, what are your thoughts on dopamine fasting? Incidentally, what are some reasonable expectations we should have for ourselves when it comes to balancing productivity and leisure in the modern day, which is riddled with instant gratification? What if esports pros implemented dopamine detox periodically? Would it improve their performance? I don't know if there's a way to know that, but Thorin, you probably have strong opinions on dopamine fasting.
Oh, I think it's very important. I think if you look at, like, everyone keeps saying all these things like, wow, technology's driving us crazy and overloading us, and then they have no solutions. Their solution is like, go, please, Sony, make the phone less addictive. It's like, the one thing they're not going to do, dickhead, is beat the fucking phone manufacturer ain't going to do it. The premise is, you're the one who picks up the phone, you're the one who opens it, you're the one who turns the TV on, you're the one who watches the Netflix. So guess what? That's the point of entry, isn't it? So you could control that. So basically, there's a premise of like fasting, in the same way as you fast from food to allow your body to heal itself, take care of things, not be overloaded with digestion. If you don't do that in terms of your dopamine, essentially, if you're always looking at screens, being inundated with information, stuff like that, first of all, I think it causes problems. I think it makes people's mood worse. I think it probably makes you less productive. You think about all these stories you hear. This is riddled in esports, by the way. Try getting an esports pro to read a fucking book. You can put these guys on a 9-hour flight with a bunch of movies they've already seen, and they won't crack that fucking book open. And they'll tell you, just boring, isn't it? No, it isn't boring. These are some of the most fascinating things you can ever encounter. What that means is you have broken your brain to the extent you can't sit and just read and let the experience unfold, to which point it then becomes amazing. So in that scenario, like, I think, look, I can only speak for myself. I think it's very important for myself. I'm trying to look into it more as it is. I'm not that good at it myself. I have the same things where I have a day where I'm on computers right until I go to sleep, and it affects things. But I do think it's something that I personally consider quite important. And if you're an esports pro, bearing in mind your entire job already is be on a computer all day, I would go out of your way, if you can, to find ways to disconnect, to have your own quiet aspect, to even have parts where you're literally just doing nothing. You're just giving yourself a total break, and you're letting yourself become just a human again for a while.
So here's the thing about modern technology. It is entirely developed to consume your attention and to provide dopamine to you as much as possible. So the problem is that, now, obviously, these things are very enjoyable. And one of the advantages of living in the modern age is that you have access to a wealth of information and experiences, ability to travel, ability to meet people, encounter new ideas that is unprecedented in the entire history of the human race. Now, this is an insane gift. But if you don't utilize it properly and you allow companies to control your attention constantly, you are sacrificing. Well, basically, it's a horrible sacrifice of your ability to actually use these tools. And so for me, my phone is always on Do Not Disturb. So you literally, my phone is silenced at all times. So I have to choose to look at my phone. It doesn't buzz. It doesn't do fucking anything. So it can't just constantly keep me in a loop of looking at it. And I don't have social media notifications turned on. So I have to deliberately go to social media in order to have that experience. Now, there are other things you can do. Like Thorin said, you can read a book. You should be cultivating a longer attention span, because that actually enables you to use your own brain and to engage with the world, rather than just reacting to a bombardment of information that is intentionally designed by psychologists and testing basically the way your brain has evolved to interact with the world in order to keep you in an addictive loop. And I don't want that. Maybe you do. Maybe you want to live your entire existence not having an original thought and just being bombarded with information and pleasure. Sounds kind of lame to me. So I think I really enjoy the modern world, but you just have to understand that you need to interact with it on your terms. Otherwise, it will just control you.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, I totally agree with everything you've said. It's like, so initially when I first started hearing about dopamine fasting, right, I hate Silicon Valley fucking wellness trends. I just fucking loathe the bullshit, the pseudoscience, espoused by people who already think they're fucking God's gift to the fucking realm of the intellect, because they made Facebook, or whatever. In fact, you've unleashed a vile evil upon the world. It's nothing to be proud of. You should be ashamed. But so whenever these wellness trends get spread into the mainstream and people adapt them, it's generally a very catchy term. Like, for example, dopamine fasting as a concept is nonsense. You can't fast from a naturally occurring substance in your brain. And people misunderstand. People think dopamine is like some substance that gets it's like cocaine or heroin, and no, give me more of that, right? But it's just there all the time. What it does is it reinforces addictive behavior as it's sort of there when you get a pleasurable response from something you're already doing. So I agree with Monty in the sense the issue already lies within the fact we are allowing ourselves to be psychologically manipulated by big tech. We're allowing ourselves to essentially engage in the name of social media and, reach in the modern world to basically sign up to a Skinner box that is doing things to us that we're not really cognizant of.
Here's the pellet.
Yeah, and so look, is it a good idea to take a social media break, irrespective of the science of dopamine fasting or anything like that? The reality is, of course, I've never met anyone, by the way, who's took a break from social media and said that it was bad for them. I've also never met anyone who took a break from social media and said it wasn't difficult for the first day or two and not check their phone, right? Like, there is
people create patterns of behavior of needing to check it.
And listen, it's happened to me too. I can't sit here and pretend like I'm some fucking guru. Like, I struggle. If a movie's 2.5 hours, as many of them are these days, I'll struggle to make it through all the way without checking Twitter. And I sort of rationalize it in my brain as going, hey, Richard, people are out to get you all the time. Have you been cancelled? Check. What I'm really doing is I'm engaging with the Skinner box. I'm getting the dopamine response of, I'm relieved I still have a career, or, a tweet's popping off, or some content's being well received. I also and I remember talking about this with Total Biscuit when he was still with us. John said he had a sickness in terms of he would have to seek out if he was being spoken about, name search, see if he was being criticized.
That tracks with his behavior. Yeah.
And I do the exact same, even though he absolutely warned me against it.
Don't you find it interesting how so many of the people who attempt to battle people like me and you and constantly advocate along the lines of mental health have absolutely zero sympathy for that topic?
Oh, I mean, this is the other thing as well. All these people who talk about mental health, they will absolutely happily dogpile someone until they commit suicide. And they will do it without thinking about it and then thoughts and prayers afterwards. I say this all the time, because I'm writing a book about this. And I've researched quite a lot of these topics. And so there's a real insidious thing that sort of started to inject itself, even pre-cancel culture or whatever label you want to apply to it. This notion that once everything enters into the attention economy, you, by engaging with it, have some form of license about whether or not those people can be allowed to function or engage with it. It sort of goes back to reality television, this concept of voting off. It was a hugely popular thing. We made game shows around it. You Are the Weakest Link. We did Big Brother. We did, all the Endemol products that come out. The idea that the public could engage and effectively remove someone, from the content, right? Well, what happens when everyday life is the content? Unfortunately, what people want to do is, you could give them the benefit of the doubt and say they just want to shame you into living like a hermit. But I think it's darker than that. I think I think a number of people actually would they would welcome you killing yourself. It's the ultimate wielding of power in a disproportionate power dynamic of somebody who doesn't have a following collectively, coming at you with a mob, to somebody who does have power and presence. It's really metastasized into something malignant and awful. But back to the dopamine response stuff, I think, for me, I feel like getting away from social media is like very, very important, especially if you have to constantly mire yourself in it. Like, there's another term that's become popular lately, like doom scrolling, which is this idea that you can't stop looking at news feeds. And we know from legal papers and complaints and fines that have been paid, they're manipulating you. They are showing you one vision of the world. They are showing you today's narrative. And the longer you scroll and the longer you stay on, the more fucking despondent you will become. In this, they're doing it on purpose. They want you hooked in, they want you depressed, they want you fearful, and then you have to come back, and what do I do next? You're essentially the modern equivalent of the 1950s motherfucker in the bunker with the radio on, listening for fucking updates from the government as to how to live your life.
It used to be really weird to be able to get horrible news updates in real time. You used to have to just really hunt that down, right? Now it's just everywhere. Not just fucking everywhere. Like, you could wake up and read a newspaper article and get a summary about what was going on in the world and then live the rest of your life. Now you can spend your entire life in a perpetual news cycle. It's fucked up.
Yeah.
Also, one thing
we weren't meant to live like this.
By the way, one thing people have to stop doing is pretend. Why does everyone pretend they're a hyper-rational robot like fucking Data from Star Trek Next Generation? No one is. Everyone's emotional, and almost everyone acts on instinct and emotion in most scenarios. And as far as I can tell, then uses the rational part of their brain to construct a plausible story as to why they actually did that because they're a hyper-rational, modern, educated, enlightened man. Because one of the reasons I hate that angle is if you asked a random pleb, the same ones that go, just stop looking, as it's that easy, by the way. Right, the same person would go, oh, well, in this scenario, like, why would anyone want to tune in and read bad news about themselves? You idiot. That's not the way the mind works. If I told you right now, right, if you open this box in the corner of the room, it'll tell you what bad thing's going to happen here in 30 minutes. Would you go, well, I don't want to know that. So every fucker in the room would have gone and opened that box. Of course you would. That scientific experiment would work in outrageous amounts of time. And you could even interview them before and ask them, would you rationally? They'd all say they wouldn't, of course. But we all know what human nature's like, though, isn't it? And that's exactly the levers they're pushing and pulling.
And the next big thing that's going to come, because, we're essentially talking about mental health almost through the lens of like depression and self-harm, essentially, and addiction, right? Which are all, on the mental health spectrum. The next thing that's coming, because everybody is sort of catering content to being like hyper dense, but really short information dumps, usually done at speed, no more than a minute. We're going to have a ton of attention deficit disorder problems in future generations. YouTube, like the success of TikTok has led these other companies, Meta, as it's fucking called now, and YouTube. They're financially incentivizing people now to make shorter content. We already had an issue where people so if I talk about a topic for 20 minutes is nothing. 20 minutes isn't even a fucking starter at a restaurant, right? But the kids go, mate, you could have summed that up in 5 minutes. Well, now what you're starting to see is the motherfuckers that sum it up in 5 minutes, the Jake Luckies of the world that basically just read a tweet, and that's and for some reason that's like mad engaging content for you. No additional context, no additional expertise. Now they go, get to the point, Jake Lucky, and so you're going to have an influencer that makes Jake Lucky look like some verbose fucking mega mind. And that's a timeline I will not engage with. I will not fucking engage with that whatsoever. But it is coming. And kids are not going to be able to focus for a 1 hour class or anything else because all the other content they consume in their lives is 60 seconds information dumps.
Well, Richard, the way I look at it is there's just more real world for me at that point in time. The more people check into the metaverse, the more I just go outside. There's nobody else there.
Boomers rise
awesome.
up.
It's fucking awesome.
Boomers rise up, yeah.
No, it's just people who actually have attention spans. Like, would I rather go to a national park with a bunch of people or with a few people while everyone else is just like living in a digital world? I'll take the fewer people. I don't care if I'm the only one living in the real world. Everyone else could be in the Matrix. Whatever. Makes my experience
unfortunately, better. It will be a scorched, resourceless wasteland. So, but
just in LA.
Evening strolls. Oh yeah, true.
He already lives in LA. He already lives in a city that people try to convince you we should make the mecca of esports. They can't even keep the motherfucking power of the internet on all the time. They can't even do step one of having a city. Partly because it shouldn't be their land and they did steal it, and probably there are ghosts fucking mecca of all time. Whatever the reason.
I mean, I think the answer to this question, guys, is like, first off, dopamine detox is just bullshit for like develop your attention span and just do normal human shit. Remember that 99.99% of human existence didn't have the internet. So like maybe you shouldn't be on the internet all the time. Like read a book, talk to somebody for a few hours, go camping. Go on a fucking hike. It's like, why do we have to invent these weird words for things of how to live normally? And here's a rule of existence for you guys that isn't always true, but is generally true. The things that will make you happy for low amounts of money are the things that are not going to be very profitable to people most of the time, and they're not going to constantly bother you for your attention. If something is bothering you for your attention, whether it's a notification on your phone or an advertisement for processed food, The broccoli lobby doesn't have money to do advertisements because it's not very profitable. It is profitable, but not very profitable for them to sell broccoli to you. If, going to a national park is very inexpensive, but they're not going to advertise that to you because they don't have to, guys. Reading a book, you can just go to a library. And guess what? It's fucking free. You can download books for free online now because any book written before 1925 right now is actually free. That's the majority of classic literature in the world, in the history of the world, is free for you. So it's not going to be advertised to you. It's not going to be a notification on your phone. It's not going to be presented to you and to try and take your attention away. Those are the things to spend your attention and to usually consume fresh produce, fresh food. It's not very hard, guys. If you're seeing it, there's an ulterior motive always. Okay, so just ignore.
Is any of classical literature written by the Nelk boys? I
don't know what that is.
You don't want
like a big podcast. Yeah,
full send.
So I don't know. I think it's not that hard. Just if somebody's if there is an entity that is trying to vie for your attention, just consume it in limited quantities. Not saying don't enjoy it. Absolutely. I love playing video games. Sometimes I eat junk food. It's good. It's delicious. But just recognize that it's probably not good for you to do all the time.
I think the best example of that, by the way, was when I was a boy. If you went to the library, because this is the 90s when the internet just come out, famously, if you didn't have home internet access, that was one of the most famous places you could get sometimes even free internet access. But if you ever went in, essentially, Monty, to a building that was designed for people to go in and read books, the only people on those computers, aside from 65-year-olds, were just delinquent kids looking up how to make bombs and stuff. It was so rather than go read all those amazing books and literature, it was the ultimate metaphor for what was coming, really.
Jolly Roger Cookbook, mate.
Classic.
I was there reading it.
I would say don't make half the stuff, though. Half it does look booby trapped. That probably will blow your hand off.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
All right. You're well known for calling out check stealers. Who is the biggest check stealing player in esports now?
Oh, he said player. He said player, so we can't say Colin McNeil. So that's off the table immediately. So
listen.
Player. Esatag's got to be up there. Esatag's got to be up there, surely, Richard. That Cloud9 contract. Look, to be fair, it was cancelled pretty early, but fucking hell. If people don't know, genuinely, Esatag was making more in salary than I think Simple makes now. That was real. So, listen, it's not that Esatag's a bad player. Essentially, Esatag, though, is your worst player. So the idea your worst player and you're not even the best teammate, more than the best player in the world, there's something a bit off when that's happening.
Yeah, it's a real hard one because it sort of is all relative, isn't it? So it's who is definitively the biggest? I don't want to
see two when he came back. That's got to be right up there. That's right up there.
Just any check, a blank
Most
check.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, a check with just zeros on it, fucking would have been bad. But yeah, I don't know. It's sort of very hard to say because as well, a lot of the salaries are really opaque. And also, would it even be CSGO? I feel it has to be League of Legends because they make so much money.
It's got to be some LCS player then, hasn't it? Because they're the ones that have the bonkers salaries. So, who would it be right now?
Someone in the chat, which should have, this would immediately spring to my mind as well. That Sword Art deal kind of felt.
Oh, that was outrageous, yeah.
Outrageous.
Especially because they basically just cancelled his second or third year and then just gave him the money. That made it even more insane. He was never worth what he was originally signed for or paid. And then on top of it, they just gave him the bag anyway and said, please leave so we can make worse decisions.
I think Huni, depending on the year, the thing is Huni has not been stealing checks some years. He's actually been good. The year he was on EG and was playing on Academy and actually he was running it. He was terrible in Academy on EG, guys. He did not give a fuck. He was really bad.
He was some Kenny Powers shit, put it out there. He's literally being paid millions. He comes to the Academy squad. He's not even trying, and he's just going lol, who gives a fuck? Just run it down. Listen, that would be hilarious if it was indeed a comedy show with a conceit that you're an arsehole. But you're just a real life arsehole now, and this is real life, Huni. This isn't that. There's no cameras rolling, mate. You're just being a dickhead now. What are you doing?
Yeah. So there have been instances of him not obviously like being a valuable player too. So I don't think that's fair to put him in that category because it's not like he was always I don't even think he's necessarily stealing checks now. He's one of the better players on his roster. It's not his fault. The roster fucking sucks.
Also an NA resident now, so it doesn't count as much for my money. He is more valuable logically than he was in the past because he's an NA player.
Yep. All right. Next, does karrigan need to win a major before being the GOAT IGL in CS:GO?
The problem I have with that goes like this. I've already gotten all of you to say that Simple was the GOAT when he didn't win a major. So how can you then turn around and go, but for IGLs though, like, which is it, guys? The problem I have is this. This is why I knew Simple would break everyone's fucking brain in CSGO. Because I knew when he looked at the eye test, like, dude, they won't be able to deny it if he keeps doing it for like 5 years. And he has, by the way, he just kept doing it for like 4 or 5 years. So the premise I would say is similar with karrigan. It's like, look, it would be easy to justify that he could be in that conversation if he wins the major. Of course, it's the biggest tournament. But I would say if you already look at the body of work, you can put him in the conversation and make like, a case for him. It's just, would he be number one? That's more the issue to me. I think he's already in the convo. It's like, who the fuck else is? You can't already be Glaive. There has to be some competitors.
No, I mean, listen, I think you don't need to win a major to be the GOAT IGL, but in the position karrigan's in, he needs to win a major to leapfrog the people who have won majors, multiple.
That's pretty much
majors.
The consensus.
Yeah, I mean, Glaive, obviously, Fallen, obviously.
Do you agree with that, though? For me, I don't know if Fallen was ever better than karrigan. I don't give a fuck. Guess what? Karrigan didn't always have the same players he did. Like, I think Fallen's a fucking whack IGL. Like 2 years he was good at that shit.
I mean, I think that's kind of a little bit like revisionist because of where he's kind of got to now. My opinion on Fallen is at the time, you have to remember when he assembled that original Brazilian team, he made hard cuts. He cut players with big names. He actively scouted coldzera himself, who was a no-namer when he came into that team. And
to be fair, he's not up for best GM of all time, right?
Sure, but I mean, listen. Also, you have to understand that, like, I mean, for example, one of karrigan's great strengths is working with, getting unbelievable value out of players that shouldn't really provide you with that value, and generally don't provide that value for anyone else in their career.
Yeah, that's true.
And Fallen's done the same. So. For me, when they were the best team in the world for the 2 years, they were. I mean, you can make an argument to say they weren't very tactically dense. I don't agree with that, but you could make that argument because they were just blowing people away. In the first year, like, they were dominant. I think they had, 3 of the top 5 players in the world. It was like Fallen, coldzera, Fallen, and Fur. So, I mean, that's just
like top 6 or top 8 or something.
Which is an embarrassment of riches. Do you need great tactics at that point? But I definitely think Fallen's in the conversation for
he's in the combo. I thought you were saying you had him above karrigan, though.
Oh, well, yeah, actually, maybe. I don't know. It's like I could go back and forth on that one. I don't know where Pronax is in the whole conversation either.
That's another question, right? Guy won 3.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, I would up today, right now, having a conversation, and I could change tomorrow because obviously there's a lot of criteria. I would have all 3 of those above karrigan for GOAT discussion, personally.
Okay. I will say in general, and he does apply this equally to sports. Richard does also believe that like rings are a baseline you have to sort of hit to be the best ever, etc. So,
not always, but I feel. If you go your entire career without winning one, what that suggests, there has to be some exceptional circumstances. There has to be an exceptional to justify it,
I think it depends on the sport. In a sport like CSGO, where there's only 5 players, meaning that a player can have a significant impact on the outcome of a match, or like basketball, it makes sense. I think in the NFL, when you have like 53 players, it becomes
but then again, it's kind of relative, right?
You've missed on that one because you have to realize Richard does have Tom Brady as the GOAT, so he would disagree with that.
No, Richard.
Absolutely, yeah, of course.
I don't even see the argument personally anymore.
There you go.
I literally don't. Just for quarterbacks, obviously, if you want to have a conversation about most GOAT football player of all time, we can do that. But in quarterbacks, I don't even think it's a discussion. I do not even think it's a discussion. I know everyone jokes off Aaron Rodgers, but listen, I say it all the time. In terms of technical ability, Rodgers, sure. But in terms of getting shit done, You can't even make an argument for it anymore. Every year there's an excuse. This time it was the special teams. Sure, he's right, but Brady's never been hampered at any point in his career. He's won a fucking Super Bowl with the Bucks. That destroys the myth.
He went to the stacked Bucks roster, dude.
Don't say it's stacked, man. Their O-line is dog shit.
No, it is this year. The first year, I think it was a lot better.
He had maybe the best receiving core in the NFL and an insane defense on that team.
They had a good defense. I definitely wouldn't say it was insane. I'd love to see the numbers from that Super Bowl season. but like Rodgers at various points in time has had like good squads at the Packers. You can't say that. You can't say he didn't.
A couple maybe.
Well, particularly when he first came in. So listen, all I'm saying is like I think Rodgers.
He's not elite. I just don't think he's the greatest of all time. That's all.
Well, history will not be kind to that view.
The plebs love that view. I just disagree. Anyway, thoughts on the Phantom Lord lawsuit? Seems like the least impactful outcome.
Because it was sort of like the drama just went away and he sort of like won, but in a very like
he won like 25 grand or whatever. Yeah.
It didn't seem it's like Richard answer. I don't really care about that case. But
I actually don't know what's happened since that came out, or if anything has happened.
I mean, so look, right? Basically, what Phantom Lord did wasn't even, him and his girlfriend who pretended to not be his girlfriend for a while during the case, to avoid criticism, I suppose. It was, basically they said it proved that they were innocent of all the things they were accused of. It absolutely didn't. In fact, quite the opposite. The sticking point and why Phantom Lord was able to win was essentially on the technicality that Twitch, when they terminated his contract, didn't follow their own procedures and had to give him notice and a sort of right to reply to the allegations. They didn't do that, and as a result he was awarded damages to the tune of 1 month, which was what their process said they had to do. They had to give him a month to remedy the situation, essentially. And so they went through and he had to submit his earnings as part of that, which I believe he had sealed away. And so he got to essentially show that, and the jury agreed that the 25,000 or whatever it was worth it. By the way, he paid much more than that over the course of this case, which it started in sort of like fucking 2016, 2017 or something. It went on for a long time. But when you make millions doing what he did, and already sort of having a lot of money to begin with, and also being in a relationship with someone who was independently wealthy, yes, these things are not a factor. You can absolutely do it. And I guess the optics of being able to say I beat Twitch in court is positive, but not on any of the material wrongdoings he actually did, none of which was disputed. In fact, the judge, in the sort of closing statements, absolutely sort of said, I think Phantom Lord lied during the trial. I think, I don't think it was reasonable. He was saying he'd never even looked at TOS and didn't know what TOS was at one point. And then somebody it had been submitted into evidence, a video of him reading TOS on his fucking stream. So the judge was like, this guy has definitely lied, right? So, I mean, there was loads of like funny little moments like that. But in terms of like what it actually, what the case actually provided to the wider Twitch community, what Phantom Lord really wanted was to be allowed back on the platform. Yes. That was never going to be enforceable, because of all the sort of Section 230 protocols and everything else that are in America. And it changed nothing for him, and it certainly changed nothing for Twitch. So yeah, I agree. One of the least impactful legal cases. I mean, had it gone another way, and there hadn't been irrefutable evidence of the stuff that like I reported and everything else, who knows? But yeah, it just wasn't very impactful. The Tfue phase one, had it actually gone to court, would have been much more significant. But they settled. So
something lighter to finish the day. What is something that made you happy today?
Today.
Richard's had a terrible day.
They're all terrible.
That's the British condition, though. That's the British condition.
I mean, I don't know. Duncan, anything good happen to you today?
I mean, I just enjoy seeing dogs, having the sunshine on me, blocking people. I'm easy. I just like the small things in life.
Yeah.
Banishing people to Thorin's Purgatory. Check it out. Look it up on Twitter. You all know you want to follow it. And by the way, there's a low-key thing I never knew I'd actually enjoy, Monty. One thing that's a very simple thing, but it is enjoyable, is actually when I log in, going and on the Thorin account, clicking followers on Thorin's Purgatory, and then seeing all the accounts that are blocked that have started following it. Because remember, they all talk. Richard knows this. They all talk such a good game when they get blocked. As in, basically, if no one knows, it's the blue checkmark equivalent of back in the day. Famously, if you're in a bar with the lads and someone goes, "Go on," then you keep looking at it, go and bloody ask her out. If they go and ask her out, right, and then she just rejects them, they always come back and they go, "She was a bloody lesbian anyway." And the joke is because they're rejected, they have to pretend they didn't care anyway. But as you see here, actions always speak louder than words. You still clicked that follow button, didn't you, motherfucker? And I intentionally made that Twitter account. So just the act of clicking follow is the most humiliating experience possible for following. So enjoy. You have now suffered the way you should.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This was fun, I guess.
It's all right.
Yeah. So. I don't know. Good things don't happen to me. The best part of my day is when I start drinking. So I don't know. I don't know what to say. Like,
I will say, by the way, in doing content, one thing I do take a perverse amount of pleasure in is when I realise that the other person thinks they've made like an ironclad point, but really all they've done is just say that they might do that. And it's like, well, actually, there's no real way of, you haven't really proven anything there. You haven't done anything. You just said something nice. And then they have to realise, like, oh, shit, does this spell not work around it? Fuck. Do we have to actually have reasons and shit? I love that, mate. I love it. Because it's just esports in a nutshell. All the idiots just go, but he answered you. He said that they were going to fix everything. Like, you fucking morons. You just sit down and pipe down in the back, peanut gallery. We'll do the fucking hard questions. There's another thing I enjoy every day, berating fans and people I believe to be below me.
It's earlier the day for me because I'm on the west coast of the United States. But my day's been pretty good. I enjoyed doing Four Horsemen today with you guys, and I like the fact that it wasn't some epic bullshit we had to deal with, but actually something kind of seemingly positive. So that made me happier than a lot of the other Four Horsemen shows that we do, where we have to get angry and shit. Even though being angry is something I enjoy too, I'll be honest. But
righteous anger is genuinely enjoyable.
Righteous indignation is a wonderful feeling.
Maybe we do an angry episode of the Four Horsemen soon about the upcomer bullshit that's
mate, you don't everywhere. Even know. You have
to be a really angry one.
That's but fucking buffet boys. You have to understand that. There's so much we could go with that.
It has to be addressed on the show. Yes, it cannot be ignored.
So look for that next week. Perhaps we'll figure out a time that will work. In the meantime, I don't know. Like I got up this morning and I got to read books to my son, who's almost 2, and he just loves sitting on my lap and reading books. Probably read like two hours of books to him every day. He really enjoys books. So hopefully
his kid can read books. Fucking Bjergsen. To be fair,
Bjergsen actually does read books. That's not fair.
Double lift. Even Monty's fucking kid reads books, mate. Get off that fucking anime and start learning your bonehead. Just because you got loads of crypto you can lose, you have to do something more in your life to have crypto, mate.
I mean,
and just go, TSM sucks now. Like, you're the cocksucker that propped him up for half a decade. Why you say that to me now? Like, I'm supposed to be on your side.
I mean, he reminds me, he's like, stop, he doesn't say it, but it's like when I'm looking at Twitter, he'll just come to me with a book and just throw it at me and sit in my lap and force me to get off social media. So he's actually helping with the dopamine fasting and to form actual human relationships with people and enjoy reading. There you go. So as your dopamine fasting, just get a kid and pay attention to it.
All right, then I'll go fucking father a love child, Monty. Great advice. Cheers.
You can adopt, Richard.
I don't even get the fun bit. What are you talking about?
There you go. So I guess we'll end the episode there. Look out for the upcomer episode soon. Gotta find a guest for that, but definitely a lot to unpack with the esports media business and it being a consistent shit show. There's tons to get mad about there, guys. Fact that business people keep running the wrong business models in this industry, signing up all this talent and then firing them. The only effective models that we've seen so far result in stealing other people who actually create content and then editing it together on your own fucking channel, which is some big bullshit. So lots to get mad about there, but we'll figure out a time to do that episode separately. Till then, esports delenda est. Goodbye.